Welcome to the Lock-In. I'm Barry Chandler. You're all very welcome. It's going to be a great night tonight. Hope you've had a good week. Hope you're staying safe and staying well. Great to see you joining again this week for our virtual Lock-In in our virtual pub where we hang out, sip a few whiskies, chat to some great guests in the world of Irish whiskey and beyond. And have a chance to get together and raise a glass together. Tonight's going to be a busy night. 3 great whiskies, 3 great guests. Don't know how we're going to squeeze it all in. The only opportunity we have is just keep going and going and going until we can get it all done, which is normally the way we do it anyway. Let me know where you are, where you're joining from, what's in your glass. Would love to know. We will be sipping on 3 whiskies tonight. We'll be starting with a Clonakilty single grain whiskey, which I have here in front of me. This will be our first whiskey this evening. We will then be sipping on the Tyrconnell single malt 15-year-old Madeira cask, which you see right here. That'll be the next whiskey we'll be drinking, and we will round out the night appropriately with a heavier style in terms of flavor profile, Blackpitts from Teeling, a peated single malt, which I'm excited to share the details of with you as I continue my peated journey as well. So 3 great whiskies. Let me know what's in your glass. Rob Hennessy is joining us from Japan. Welcome, Rob. Patrick is joining us from Clonakilty down in Florida. Good man, Patrick. Steve in Colorado, Mark Ashley, Jeff in Indianapolis. Great to see you all. This is going to be a lot of fun. So we've been doing the lock-ins now for a year, longer than a year actually. And we've kind of the lock-ins have typically followed a certain pattern, a certain format, certain number of whiskeys, certain number of guests. I've decided that now is the time to break it all up into little segments and split it up a little bit, add a little bit of fun to it. So our guests don't even know this tonight, but they are part of our first ever little segments that we'll have tonight. So over the next night and the next few weeks, we'll have more and more different segments. So I might as well give you a little tease as to what those segments are. So for example, one of our segments will be Put a Cork in It. And that's when we have a Cork person join us to chat about Cork, and then more Cork, and then maybe drink a whiskey from Cork. But mostly it's just talk about Cork. So Put a Cork in It will be one of our segments. We'll actually be using that segment tonight when Niamh O'Donovan joins us from Daniel O'Connell's pub in Virginia. So that's one of our segments. Let me see. What else have we got here? Oh, yes. So whenever anybody joins us from the world of Irish whiskey, who works in the world of Irish whiskey, whose job it is to promote and sell and introduce people to Irish whiskey, we'll have a segment called It's a Whiskey Business, All Right. And Anne from Clonakilty will be joining us shortly, and she will be part of this first segment. She never knew she was going to be part of a segment. It's a whiskey business, all right. That's another one of our segments. And then we have segments related to the whiskies that we'll be drinking. So, for example, if we're drinking a pot still whiskey, where there's a will, there's a pot still. So that's a little segment that we'll have whenever there's a pot still whiskey. No pot still whiskey tonight, so that segment won't be appearing. But we do have a segment called If It's Grain, I'm Playing. Isn't that brilliant? That's our segment we'll have when we drink our Clonakilty single grain tonight. So every time you bring a single grain on, that'll be our segment. And then, of course, when we have single malt, and we have 2 single malts tonight, we need a segment for those as well. And that'll be malt, single and ready to mingle. So we got 2 single malts tonight, and they're ready to mingle with us. So whenever we have a malt, we'll have these little segments. What else have we got? Oh, yeah. So sometimes we'll combine segments, and sometimes we'll lose the run of ourselves altogether. 2 or 3 or 4 segments might be all joined together, such as the chaos. So, for example, tonight when Niamh O'Donovan joins us from Virginia, from Daniel O'Connell's pub, not only will she be in the segment Put a Cork in It, but she'll also be in the segment I Wish I Was in That Pub. So whenever we bring somebody on from a pub, we're going to say, I wish I was in that pub. So we may need more segments. I don't know. You can tell me what other segments we might need, but that's going to help us formulate our lock-ins going forward and help us break them up into little segments. So that's it. Cahur says, I'm rambling. Cahur, come up here and host it yourself, you chancer, every Friday night. Steve is starting with Clonakilty Primo Liqueurs Armagnac finish. Very good. And Greg Anderson says, I halt for malt. I like that one. Kieran Quinn wants a Tipperary segment. We might get you one of those. We need enough Tipperary whiskey to be able to make that happen, though. Vancouver, Washington in the house. Welcome, Michael. And Jacob joining us from Chicago. And MacFodine Photos joining us with a Silky Irish from Donegal. Good man. Good man. Maureen missed last week and felt lost. Well, thankfully, you're back tonight. So let us start. Let us bring in our first guest of the evening for our first ever segment, which is It's a Whiskey Business, All Right. And we're going to bring in Anne, who's going to join us. And Deno's joining us from Clonakilty Whiskey. Anne, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. Way to put me on the spot.
We just pounced. just jumped on top of you, with these segments. You're now part of It's a Whiskey Business, all right. And seeing as you're in the whiskey business, you get to be the first ever guest on a segment. So you're very welcome.
Well, thank you. I am always happy to talk about the industry I'm in. I think it's really exciting. Who can complain, right?
That's right. Exactly. And it's not your first appearance on the Lock-In. You were here, if I remember, it was September last year, halfway to St. Patrick's Day.
Yes, I was so new to the company. It's funny, I go and I look back and, it was so much fun. But knowing what I know now, being with the company for a few more months, I'm really excited to dive deeper into the Clonakilty range. And of course, the Clonakilty range has expanded since we talked last. So I've got all the bottles I carry with me on the road here.
When we did the segment with Clonakilty, it was like halfway to St. Patrick's Day. I think we did this ambitious 80 different pubs, 300 guests, 16 hours of programming, a very ambitious plan. And we worked our way up the East Coast. Not as ambitious tonight. We're going to do it slow and steady. Take it easy.
What's funny is you were asking, so he was asking me to sing earlier. I'm not much of a musical person, but I was at O'Connell's earlier dropping off a bottle to Niamh, and she was with a group of people. One of the gentlemen gave me his card. We exchanged information, and he is an Irish singer, but didn't have his guitar or anything on him, so we'll have to bring him in next time.
You had great excuses for getting out of singing or dancing or participating in any kind of extracurricular non-whiskey activity. We wouldn't put you on the spot, though.
That wouldn't help any of the viewers. Oh, by the way, I should mention my counterpart that is in Oregon is on the live today, and so he'll be answering any questions that anyone might have in the chat. Anything that I can't get to, he'll be there answering. His name is Scully, and he is the son of one of the founders, so that's pretty exciting. So he's
how are you, Sean?
He's doing.
Sean was on here in the past.
Oh, he hasn't been here in the past.
Yeah, no, we've had him on once. All right, Sean was on. All right, talking about Clonakilty way back, one of our early lock-ins, I think, actually.
Yeah.
So we're going to be tasting one of the rarer or least well-known styles of Irish whiskey, and maybe the least known, of all the styles of Irish whiskey as a standalone style, and that's the Clonakilty single grain tonight. Had you ever had a single grain whiskey before working for Clonakilty?
No, I think I mentioned before working for Clonakilty, I worked for a big distributor, and that's so cute. Before working for Clonakilty, I worked for a big distributor, and so we sold a bunch of different types of whiskey. And I think I mentioned that I wasn't a big fan of Irish whiskey to begin, because I had only had one Irish whiskey that I wasn't a fan of. And what they don't tell you is Irish whiskey is just like any other whiskey. There's going to be different whiskeys for different occasions. And so then, I got on board with Clonakilty and just exploring the whole field. I've just had so much fun exploring the whole field. It really has changed my perspective on a lot of other whiskeys, and the flavors that I get from certain overly malted whiskeys. It's just, it's exciting exploring. So since starting with Clonakilty, I've, had many more Irish whiskeys. So no,
it's a tough old job. Tough old job you have exploring the world of Irish whiskey and being paid for it. And, research. Yeah, well, very familiar with it. So the single grain whiskey then was particularly interesting to me, and one I wanted to talk about. We've had a few single grains on the show over the past few months, and as I've started to get to understand them and know them a bit more as these standalone styles, I've wanted to dive deep into understanding them and learning them, and I want to introduce other people to them. We had Egan's single grain on a while back, and now we're here with the Clonakilty single grain. Why don't you help us understand or introduce us to what this single grain is? I'm going to pour a drop into my glass, and we can ramble and talk about it as we're sipping, maybe.
So single grain's a really interesting style. It's the least common, of course, of all of the whiskeys in Ireland, and that could be for a few reasons. normally single grain, when you think of single grain, it's usually just a component in blends. And it depends on the distillery that's making it, of course, and the distillery that's putting out the blend. But normally it's the less expensive component in blends. You'll have a portion being single malt and you'll have a portion being single grain or malt whiskey and grain whiskey. And it's, so we isolated it. This was actually never designed to be released. We didn't plan on releasing a single grain, and then we got the single grain in our hands, and it was just fantastic. And our master distiller, Paul, he had a vision for the single grain. And so we isolated it. We finished it in Bordeaux casks, which amplifies the punchy nature of single grain. So single grain adds the oomph in blends. It also is a lighter style of whiskey, so it picks up on a lot of cask finishes really, really wonderfully. So it has a very important role in wherever it's being used, blends, alone. So he finished it in Bordeaux casks, and Bordeaux is not a very common thing to finish whiskey in because it's not a dessert wine. Normally you finish whiskeys and dessert wines. So the Bordeaux is going to add structure and tannins to the single grain. So I like to tell people this is an artistic style of single grain. It's not just alone. He's emphasizing certain things that might not normally get emphasized by the Bordeaux cask. And so I get two flavors really distinctly with this amongst, everything else. I get strawberry really pronounced. I also get this essence of cotton candy, I should say burnt sugar, not the sweetness of burnt sugar, but the essence. If you were to take the sweetness away, sort of that caramelized charcoal sugar flavor. What are you getting with it?
Yeah, I love this. This to me is a great bridge between bourbon and Irish whiskey. For people who want to get into Irish whiskey, there's that. It's kind of delicate, but there's a lovely sweetness to it, and there's a lovely, bourbon drinkers are used to their corn-based, their maize-based whiskeys, and for an Irish whiskey to have, well, not very many Irish whiskeys have this high a percentage of the maize in them. I think it's a lovely, light, delicate, lovely sweetness, strawberry jam coming through to me. You definitely get the notes from that finish in the wood cask, in the Bordeaux cask, the wine cask. But very delicate, very light. Like there's no overpowering notes on the nose, is there?
No, definitely not. Another unique thing about the single grain Bordeaux finished Irish whiskey that we produce is when we're making it, 50% of what you're tasting in this glass comes from first fill Bordeaux casks. So we'll take the Bordeaux and then we'll fill it right after the Bordeaux. The second half, the other 50%, is second fill. So we keep the Bordeaux casks around, and then we fill them again. And each component, each of those 50% components lends really important flavors to the whiskey. It's important to know that the wood that you're finishing your whiskey in changes over time with each and every fill. So that first fill, what we're pulling from the cask is we're pulling a lot of those wine flavors, those sweeter, those red fruit flavors. The second fill is where we're going to pull that oak, that spice, that complexity from. And so it's very important that we are, doing this because it creates a really interesting, complex whiskey. When you finish tasting it, you immediately want to go back in for more. And I lend that to that second fill maturation. So,
Sláinte. I took a sneaky sip.
Sláinte.
Single grains are overlooked. I think it's mostly because of their availability, their accessibility. They're not very available yet. There's more and more of them coming on the market. But everyone here has had grain whiskey, single grain whiskey. They've just had it in a blend, and they may not have deconstructed their blend to maybe take apart all the pieces that are in there. But single grain is both the most unusual and the most rare and the most hard to find, but also the most used, I would say, because of the blending side of things. Your Jameson, your Bushmills, your Paddy, your Tullamore Dew, they all have a very high grain component. And so you mentioned, and this is a whiskey that you sourced with the intention of blending it, discovered actually lovely note to this, lovely flavor. Let's put this in some wine casks. Let's finish it off. You don't have a column still in the distillery in Clonakilty,
No.
and there's no intention to have one, is there?
There is no intention to have one. And so because of that, when we got it a little bit over 3 years ago, it was 7 years old. And so then we put it in our casks, matured it for a little bit longer. And what you're tasting is all 10-year-old single grain. We don't have any more of this. And so we are looking at taking it off the market come December, just because there's not a way for us to produce it, because we should get into the production of this after I mention that we will be discontinuing this come later this year. That's something that's in the talks right now, because we don't want to then have to source younger whiskey and put out a lower quality product. Clonakilty and anything, it's all about the quality of the product. If we aren't able to confidently release something that is absolutely fantastic, then we won't release it at all. So those Bordeaux casks will go to other uses, which I'm very, very excited to see. Of course, there's such a bright future for everything Clonakilty. But something that I wanted to address, that I've received questions of this by customers, by consumers, regular people that are coming in, seeing me in a liquor store and doing a tasting with me. Single grain, it sounds like it means that you're just using one grain for the whiskey, but that's not the case at all. Just like single malt, the word single refers to, it comes from one distillery, and the word grain just refers to the fact that most of the grains in this blend are unmalted. So our blend, it's made up of anywhere from 90 to 95% corn, maize, and then we have to have 5 to 10% malted barley, just because you can't malt grain. And if you can't malt anything in the blend, you're not able to create whiskey. So something needs to be maltable. So it still is 2 different grains in this whiskey, but it's from a single distillery.
And always produced in a column still, unlike the front of the websites of every distillery that show their lovely gleaming copper pot stills. Grain whiskey is produced in the tall column stills. You have a picture of them here that they're produced in, which is interesting because there's a lot of history and controversy to column stills. You'll be familiar with them if you go to Tennessee and Kentucky, and the coffee still, or the column still, or the continuous still, as it's known.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy around column stills, and it completely makes sense. A little history on column stills. Column stills were invented by an Irishman with the last name Coffey. If that rings a bell, that's because column stills later evolved to be the coffee still. And that is what Scotland used to undercut Irish whiskey pricing. So when this Irish gentleman came up with the column still, his own country, Ireland, rejected the idea. They said, that's not how we make whiskey. That's not whiskey as we know it. And so he then took the idea to the Scots. They said, sweet, we see an opportunity to create whiskey with this. And so they did, and they were able to make it a little bit cheaper, because the column still is an efficiency machine. Unlike the pot still, where you have to do things in batches, the column still, you can just run and run and run. And so it did help to cut down costs a lot. And they took that, and that was sort of the beginning of at that point, the decline of Irish whiskey. Now, of course, a bunch of things happened since then.
It was a controversial thing. There was all kinds of tribunals in the late 1800s around the column still, and the Irish decreeing that what came out the other side of that was what's known as the silent spirit and wasn't whiskey. But eventually it was sanctioned and allowed to be called whiskey. And the blending aspect of whiskey didn't really take hold in Ireland for many, many years. So there were some distilleries that did take him up on his offer of his quicker, more efficient still, but not very many of them did. Today, of course, grain the grain component in the column stills makes up the majority of blends and therefore the majority of Irish whiskey sold, but just not stand alone. And there's all kinds of disputing as to who invented what, and Ennia's coffee is credited with it. And then some people say, well, didn't he perfect something that the French invented? And then they perfect something the Russians made, and the Russians perfect something that they made in Mongolia and China. But I suppose we get to claim it because nobody's here to argue with us. So we'll claim it as the Irish, and we'll wait for the French and the Russians to shake a stick at us.
There are so many people, there's so many stories, and it's been a long time, obviously, right? So they didn't have the internet back then to record everything. So we just go based off of the stories that we hear. But yes, you're right. I think it's
no social media posts.
Mm-hmm.
No social media posts of Ennia's coffee constructing his stills. He avoided social media. He got away without it.
I don't know how he did.
He's better off. This is a lovely, delicate sipping whiskey. Very light, very floral. And you mentioned that the casks are the secret to the grain whiskey side of things, like because grain whiskey itself would be a lot less flavorful by its nature than a pot still whiskey. The maize would have less of a flavor. Yeah,
it's a blank page, and that's really what offers these amazing opportunities to finish blends in special casks, like we do with our port cask. We had a limited cognac cask release, and like we do with all of our beer casks. But it's a blank page, and so yes, so I think that's why it picked up on the Bordeaux flavors. And Bordeaux, being that it's not a dessert wine, it also wouldn't have that much of if you were to put a single malt into a Bordeaux cask, it wouldn't have the same effect. Now we do have a single malt Bordeaux cask, and what's really cool about that is it's a complete 180 from the single grain Bordeaux cask that we have here.
Yeah, it's I'm really enjoying the journey into single grains. This is again, it's very light, it's very delicate, but you're getting the sweetness. You're getting some of the tannins coming through from the wine cask. I'd recommend anyone to give this a try, especially since it's going to go out of production and won't exist any longer. If you do like a grain whiskey and you like a little floral red note, a little red berry note or a grape note coming through, this is well worth picking up. The grain side of things, I've been trying to wrap my head. I'm clearly not a scientist, not an academic related to whiskey. I have no formal training in in almost anything. But I was trying to understand how does grain distillation work, and understanding the plate system in these tall stills, and how efficient it can be, and just how high a ABV the alcohol comes out the other side, like north of 90% ABV, 93, 94% ABV, giving you a lot of liquid for a lot of high alcohol spirit that can be produced far more efficiently, far cheaper, far quicker than its pot still cousins. But there's a role for all of them, and it's not like one should do away with the other. But I do think we should get more into grain whiskies, and so we're putting out the recommendations here tonight. The call: grab yourself a grain whiskey, grab yourself a Clonakilty, especially if it's disappearing soon. How much? So do we know how much available there is left? Is there? Is it panic stations yet, or can we wait a while?
It's not panic stations yet. I've got plenty to distribute now. If you're not in a state where Clonakilty is yet, then you got to go online and order it online. But I'm in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia area, and I'm making sure that it's well distributed. I've tasted a lot of people on this whiskey, and I've been told that it's a lot of people's favorite single grain style, which is such a huge compliment. But when I taste a little insight into the industry, when I do my tastings with customers, I generally follow an order. I'll start with the single batch, and then I'll move on to the single grain. And it provides me a really unique opportunity to then explain a little bit about single grain and the difference between our single batch, which is a blend, and our single grain, which is I tell my customers, it's the way that I see it. This is an artistic style of single grain because we never intended on releasing it on its own, and we did because it was that phenomenal. And the Bordeaux cask finish really just amplifies those tannins, the structure that single grain offers, which is really what makes it so perfect for blends as well.
You were mentioning when we were chatting earlier about when the Bordeaux casks arrive in Clonakilty, they have to be inspected for sulfur. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah. So wine producers, when they make, and wine regardless, most of the time their old wine casks are then going to be reused by wineries. So what they do is they coat the inside with a thin layer of sulfur wax, and that is very, very bad for whiskey. You do not want your whiskey having any hint of sulfur in it. We would be a very different distillery if we released a sulfured whiskey. So what we have to do is we have to open those casks up. What we do is we take the heads off of them. We don't have to take the staves apart, which is really nice, but we have to open the casks up, see if there is in fact that sulfur inside, and then we would shave that part off. And so you're not getting any of that in your casks, and that probably in your whiskey, and that probably also lends to the reason why actual wines, not just dessert wines, are so uncommon in finishing whiskey, because it's a real challenge.
And you've been based on the East Coast now since you started with Clonakilty, and you've been knocking on doors and shaking trees and trying to get partnerships and shelf space in bars and restaurants and retail locations. You recently, you were sharing with me, and I saw some of it online, you got involved with the rugby side of things in DC. Tell us about your collaboration with rugby, and tell us about that whiskey. I think you probably have one there behind you, do you?
Yes, I've got two behind me. So we partnered with Old Glory DC, which is the Major League Rugby team for the area. And I can't say that it was all me, because it was a large portion my colleague Hopper, who is now conquering the upstate New York area. So if you are in the upstate New York area and you want to get your hands on some Clonakilty, just comment below and I can help. And Scully, Sean can also help you get your hands on some Clonakilty. But this is our bottle that's available for regular distribution with Old Glory DC. So what this is a single malt Bordeaux cask. So I think it's really interesting that we are partnering a single grain Bordeaux cask tonight with a single malt Bordeaux cask. And so we produced 1,300 bottles of this. And it's absolutely delicious. So that is available for regular release. The second item that we have is our legacy bottle. This one is only available online. You have to go to the Old Glory DC website. But the cool thing about this is it's finished in Martinique rum casks, and it's a level up. It's a level or two up from the single malt Bordeaux cask. So this one is a blend, and it is finished in Martinique rum casks, and it's absolutely phenomenal. You get it, and it comes in this amazing box that fits it very tightly. So let me see if I can get it out. So every bottle is numbered, and the people that order this bottle then get a chance to enter for a trip to Ireland for two, all expenses paid. It's a very exciting opportunity.
You never gave me that offer. I was never offered a trip to Ireland. What?
We'll hook you up with Patrick.
Hint, hint. Yeah. Do you want to fly me back to Ireland? I'll go and bless the distillery or do something. Try and do something for you in Clonakilty.
We'll do a Barry Chandler collaboration. It'll be wild.
We should. Yeah. I want one of those lovely boxes too. Those are lovely little cases you've got for the whiskey. Aren't they lovely?
Aren't they amazing? You can save it afterwards and just put any whiskey in here and just really
put your ashes in it, whatever you want. Yeah.
Whatever you want to do. So that's something that's really exciting that we have going. So we've partnered with this rugby team. I'm at all of the home matches, and it's an exciting opportunity for us as a smaller brand that is making our way and building up in this industry that it's so hard to crack into. You've got your different brands with their different alliances, and so cracking into the industry with a brand new brand is not easy, but it's so rewarding. It's so rewarding.
So remind us again the details of these two bottlings that are only available. They're only available in DC. Is it in the DC area, or are they available on?
The first bottle I mentioned is only available in the DC area. We're going through the traditional methods of distribution for this. So only DC, Maryland, and Virginia, those 3 states. Virginia is a little bit tricky, as some of the people that are watching who are aware of this bottle might know. It's a little bit tricky because it's a control state. So you have to special order it. You have to go to your local Virginia store and you have to tell them that I want item number 015788. And that's what this item number is. And they will special order it for you. It'll be shipped to that store and then you can pick it up a few weeks later. The second bottling is only available online. And so by making it only available online, we're able to cut costs down for the customer. And that's something that we really aim to do. So only available online. And this one is about $185 online plus taxes and a little bit of shipping. And you can go to the Old Glory website to figure that, find that, and it's available on our website as well.
Be nice to drink while you're standing in a cold winter, in the winter or the cold DC weather, sipping on some Martinique rum, dreaming of the Caribbean.
Oh, it's absolutely phenomenal. It's dreamy, it's sweet and smooth and everything. There's a reason why this one is the higher tier bottle. And we're just happy that we're able to offer an additional trip incentive for one lucky couple.
What's the ABV on those bottles, Anne?
The ABV on the first one is 46%. So it's a little bit higher than everything in our normal release, which is very exciting. The ABV on the second one, this is cask strength. So this one is 58.5%. So well over 110 proof. So we're really excited about that. Almost 120 proof. You'll.
That's great. It's not very often we see a cask strength Clonakilty whiskey, not in the United States anyway. Is that the first cask strength in in the US?
Well, of course there are going to be private barrels that we do with specific liquor stores that come out at cask strength. But yes, this is the first cask strength version that's available to anyone in the US because it's available online, which is really exciting for everyone. It's a great opportunity.
Very good. That's exciting.
Something that most of my customers have asked, specifically also, Jack Rose. I've stopped by Jack Rose here in DC, which is a world-renowned whiskey bar. They have asked for a cask strength Clonakilty. So we're working on that with them. And hopefully it's something coming very soon.
Well, that's interesting. For those who are looking for the website, oldglorydc.com, Old Glory DC. And if you go to the homepage, you'll see the whale tail screaming at you right there, the minke whale and its tail splashing in the Atlantic Ocean. Oldglorydc.com. Let me put it up on the screen.
It's so exciting, being that I'm building a brand that is, we are a family-owned distillery. We're not owned by any big conglomerate. And so it's very, very exciting watching a brand like us that puts so much into the product that we put out, so much love and heart, and is starting from brand new in America, competing against all of these other brands that, who knows. But it's exciting seeing people tell me, hey, I'm seeing that logo around. Oh, I recognize that logo. I'm seeing Clonakilty everywhere. I was at my distributor's warehouse. This was a few months back. And before me, there was the business it wasn't like it is now in the DMV. And so I've really worked with the reps that are local to really build up the brand. And I was at the warehouse picking up a order, and one of the reps, who didn't even realize I was standing right behind him, he saw the order being wheeled out up to the loading dock where reps pick up their stuff. And he said to his colleague, he said, "I'm seeing that brand everywhere." And I was like, tap, tap, tap. Hi.
But now they're shipping you off. They're shipping you away from the East Coast. So successful have you been that they're afraid of you and they're sending you out west. You're going back to California, aren't you?
They are. I'm so excited. I mean, we can so that's happening in late August, early September. I will be opening up the state of California. It is the pinnacle of my dreams. I've always, I grew up What?
You have to dream.
There we go. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I moved to the East Coast about 4 years ago in late 2017. And, you know, I've been able to, things have just been outstanding out here. And, you know, being able to build a career in the industry that who could wish for better? You know, when I was in California, back when I was growing up, of course, I was in the restaurant industry, and I absolutely loved it. But I saw more of an opportunity for myself to advance and make it a career with, you know, with the alcohol industry. And so this way I'm able to stay out of a 9 to 5, which there's nothing wrong with that if you know, if you have a 9 to 5. But I'm just the type of person where I just have to be in front of people talking all the time. And so the liquor industry has provided me with such a great opportunity to still do what I'm passionate about every single day. I mean, every single day I just share what I'm passionate about. And it's really great because Irish whiskey being the fastest growing sector in spirits, a lot of the time when I'm in these stores, I'm doing a lot of teaching. I'm doing a lot of, and there's a lot of oohs and ahs and, oh, I didn't know things were done like that. And, oh, I didn't know that was the history. So it's very rewarding being able to change people's perspective on things.
You're doing the Lord's work there. And isn't it great that we have an American waving the flag for Irish whiskey? We're very proud of you. You're doing us all proud. It seems like there's loads of bottles being ordered anyway. Loads of Old Glory bottles have been ordered. People are trying to figure out how to get them back to Ireland. People are ordering them and having them delivered. Greg Anderson's got his, right? So that'll be it. You'll be out of bottles by the morning, I'd say.
So a little disclaimer, both of these we made about 1,300 bottles. This one a little bit less and this one a little bit more than 1,300. So the one that's available for local distribution, I presume that we will be distributing it until the middle of the summer, which is perfect because the season is, you know, going to go until August, give or take. You know, we've got to see about playoffs, which is going to be so exciting. And then this one we made just under 1,300. And here's a cool thing. So I enter liquor lotteries a lot. I'm a whiskey collector, and I think about the odds a lot, right? So oftentimes you'll enter these liquor lotteries, and you're competing against 10 to 60,000 other people for this one prize. We only made 1,269 of these bottles. So that means that with that golden ticket opportunity, your odds are a whole lot higher because you're one of 1,269 instead of 100, or, you know, one of 60,000.
Somebody give Anne a raise. She's look at this selling. Look what's happening here. She's hustling. She's moving the whiskey. I see a Stories and Sips get together at a rugby match up in DC while we all sip on a few bottles of whiskey. I think that's in our future once the world opens up a bit more. And then we'll head over to Alexandria for a nightcap over to Daniel O'Connell's, because we'll bring Niamh in now in a second. Niamh O'Donovan's going to join us. And she's going to host us with Irish coffees and tell us tall tales of her time in Ireland as well. That'll be the plan. And make it happen.
We'll do that. One thing I want to say about the rugby matches is I'm not a sports person. I don't know anything about rugby, and I'm learning, and it's so exciting. You know, being in the rugby community has been so welcoming. Everywhere I've gone that I've wanted to know about rugby, they're so happy to explain. They're so passionate, and they want others to be passionate about it as well. And it's such a welcoming community. You can ask questions and be curious. And as a whiskey drinker, I love it when people ask questions and are curious, and I get to share my passion with them. So it's been such a pleasure being able to go to all the rugby games. I should say I'll be at all of the local rugby games, all of the home ones that are here in DC. I believe there's about 7 of them left, or 6 or 7 of them left. And I'll be in the VIP area, but I'm going to try and come out and sort of do the rounds and say hi to everyone.
Hang with the peasants. Hang out with the peasants. Come out of your VIP area. Take your velvet coat or your fur coat off. and spend time with the rest of us. Is that what you'll do?
We have a stand there with an opportunity to purchase the legacy bottle, and so, but there is a nice halftime the food in the VIP area.
Meet and greet with Anne in the VIP area. If you give Anne a shout, she'll bring you into the VIP area. So everyone now go to the games and haunt her. Ensure that you make her bring in there for the free sandwiches and the free sausages inside the VIP area.
Something else I'd love to touch on is our collaborations with being that I got in this industry because I'm so passionate about whiskey and just fine food and fine spirits. We collaborate with a lot of local breweries. I don't think that's new news to anyone that's a Clonakilty fan. But when I joined Clonakilty and I found out that, oh my gosh, now I have the freedom to partner with my favorite brewery or distillery and come out with help create an amazing product. I do want to tell everyone about this amazing product that we are going to be releasing in late, probably around the fall time.
Is this an exclusive? Is this a heads up? Are we getting this first?
Yeah,
or is this word out there?
Some industry people already know, the customers that I've talked to about it, but the public doesn't know yet, and so this is an exclusive. I might get backlash for this later.
Drum roll. Here we go. Right, give it to us.
So, Catoctin Creek Distillery, which is a distillery in Virginia. They make rye, they make brandy, and they make gin. They are one of my favorite ryes out there. I'm a rye girl. I think I mentioned before, that my two go-tos at this point are a rye whiskey and Irish whiskey. I think that they offer the best of both sectors, American whiskey and the whiskey that was meant to be whiskey. Not anything against. I'm a little nervous. So
you're fine.
I reached out to Catoctin Creek and I said, hey, I work with Clonakilty Distillery. I would love to do a collaboration. We've done multiple collaborations in the past. The most recent one in the DMV area is the Manor Hill cask. And so this one's my absolute favorite. So I reached out to them and I said, I know it's a rye, it's another spirit. So it might be a little bit of a stretch, but I hope you're willing to work with us and create something fantastic. And they said, we're all on board. And so we had a great meeting. I got an exclusive tour of the distillery. They let me taste the beer, the first, before it goes into the stills, the fermented 100% rye grain, which is fantastic. Yeah. And then they also let me taste the distillate right off the stills, so white whiskey. And fantastic stuff. So we have 16 of their Rabble Rouser rye casks in Ireland right now that were just filled with our whiskey. Now, Rabble Rouser rye is a very exclusive and allocated release that they do every few years. And they only usually release about 500, 600 bottles. So we got basically all of their casks for this Rabble Rouser allocated amazing cherried rye. And we should have it finished aging sometime. Hopefully it'll hit the market in the fall. There's a lot of it. So it's definitely going to be in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area.
Great.
But I'm pushing to get it in California, because if I started this and I don't have it in California, then I'm going to... I
mean, you started it just so you could enjoy it yourself, so you'd have to bring it to California.
Exactly. I have to bring it to California. So
that's exciting. Well, make sure to keep us up to date and give us more details as they're available on that and what that would look like and where it'll be, and make sure we get to taste it. Or if you don't, we'll never have you back. Or we can find you in some VIP area. We'll just look in all the VIP areas of all the stadiums in DC and California, and you'll be there with your finger sandwiches.
With my sunglasses and hat, hiding from you guys, you vultures.
And stay with us. Will you stay with us? So what I want to do is I want to bring in Niamh, who's going to join us as well, and we'll keep the conversation going about DC, because you have lots going on with Clonakilty as well. But what we need to do is we need to add another Cork person to the chat, because right now it's only one Cork person, one American. We need two Cork people and one American. Niamh O'Donovan, all the way from Cork. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are we doing, lads?
We're doing great. We're doing great. You're joining us from Daniel O'Connell's in Alexandria, Virginia.
Live from Daniel O'Connell's from the Fitzgerald room here. Yeah, and I have to tell you, lads, I want to apologize for the background noise, but I also have to say this is so fabulous that everything COVID, that we are allowed to have greater people come into the restaurant, and there's bar seating now allowed at Virginia. So I'm very excited. But I do apologize for the background noise.
We're delighted to hear the noise. The noise is brilliant. And Niamh, you didn't know it, but you're actually part of a new segment called Put a Cork in It, where we add a Cork person to our show. And so thank you for being our first Cork guest.
I hate to break it to you, right? But I drive everyone mad here with it. It's like, hashtag, I'm from what? I'm from Cork, like. It's like, I love it. I absolutely love it. And Barry, you're going to tell everyone that when we spoke earlier on today, we had the essential conversation of, do you know? And it was, do you know so-and-so? I do. So we go way back, Barry. We go way back.
Pure Cork. If you're from Cork, you must ask somebody if they know some random person from Cork, and they normally will. And we did. We had that today, and we know the same people, and which means you can get away with nothing.
Quality people too, may I add?
Quality.
Yeah.
They are. Niamh, tell us what is Daniel O'Connell's and how did you get there?
So Daniel O'Connell's, what can I say? Listen, we've been open 15 years. Actually, this year we're open 15 years. It's owned by John and Margaret Brennan, who also have a bar and restaurant in Waterford, the Unaroo. They had a vision of bringing, a high-class Irish restaurant bar, like the real Irish bar and restaurant feel, to DC, to be honest, in Northern Virginia. And they certainly did that. I mean, I hope all of you that are watching, if you haven't been to Alexandria, Virginia, please listen. My cell number is on my business card, so I'm contactable 24/7, but everyone's welcome to come in and walk around. I mean, it literally is 300 years in the making. We have, snubs and, items from cathedrals and churches throughout Ireland. It's it's a walk down history lane. But it's a beautiful place. As I said, we're on the 100 block of King Street. Like I said, open 15 years. I came to America 20 years ago. Clearly, I didn't lose the Cork accent. And I have to be honest with you, I'm very proud of that, because honestly, if I even attempted an American accent, even my two sons, Connor and Brody, are like, don't do that. They're like, Mom, don't do that. Yeah, don't do that. But no, so I've been working for the Brennan family for 5 years now, and it really is a labor of love, though. You have to, you're married to the business, but you have to be, because not only are you in charge of the business itself, but the staff and the guests that come in. You know what I mean? It's a partnership kind of thing, which also includes our distributors, like Anne, with the likes, of Anne. And so it is building the right partnerships and making those special connections that, if we can all collectively sit down and have the same vision, we'll all bring everything to the next level. So I was extremely excited to hear about Clonakilty, like nobody else. So not only because of the rugby, because both my boys, and I grew up with rugby, and both my boys have played for the USA. Very proud of that, plug. But not only that, just the fact of going to boarding school in Clonakilty, I was like, here's an opportunity to potentially embarrass half of the town of Clonakilty. I won't do that tonight, right? I won't do that tonight. But very, very proud of the culture that's Clonakilty. You know what I mean? I mean, when I think of Clon, I think of arts. I think of outside the box thinking, small business, supporting local. Like, this is where it all started. It is that shop local, support everything local. And so I immediately was on board. As I said, here, I have my bottle here, and I have to say,
you got your single grain.
I'm going to pour myself a little one right now.
Do have you a good toast? Have you a good toast for us, Niamh? As a pub manager there now, you should have some kind of a good Irish toast for us, surely.
I'm sure. Come here. Hashtag Shanta, like. I mean, we're amongst friends. No, but
That's
like,
right.
to be honest, like, I don't want to be offending anyone. If it was a proper lock-in, we'd have a proper toast, right? But considering who knows this is going to Sláinte, lads. Okay, your
Sláinte,
health.
all of you.
Your health. But it's
Niamh, I want to dive into Clonakilty and you're growing up and going to school there in a little bit, but you were sharing a great story with me when we chatted earlier about the building, about the history of the building that you're in right now. Would you share that with our audience?
So here's something that, to be quite honest, the majority of people don't know. So Old Town Alexandria is genuinely Old Town. But the actual building that O'Connell's was built by Colonel William Fitzgerald. He was a Wicklow man, and he came over to the States when he was a very, very young lad, got involved with the military, and he became George Washington's aide-de-camp. Actually, and he built this building, as he did every building on the 100 block on King Street, his family home, which is now the Burke and Herbert Bank. So he was like, I mean, it's an amazing, we had a beautiful park here that was called the Fitzgerald Park, 100% down to everything that he did to Old Town. So here you have an Irishman coming to America and building this gorgeous, gorgeous town that we have here today. So we're very proud that literally the bricks and mortar are built by an Irishman. What is also very interesting, of course, is that it's Daniel O'Connell, who is our namesake. This is who we are, Daniel O'Connell's. At the same period of time, Daniel O'Connell and Colonel Fitzgerald, would not have been the greatest of friends politically. And so there was a lot of controversy, let's just say, back in the day between the two. And Daniel O'Connell, being our first freedom fighter in Ireland, fought for the Irish rights, which is why he's such the fabulous person that he is and everything about him. But we're very much haunted here. The place is haunted, lads.
Like
And
not in a Cork way,
want-
like not like Cork haunted, like, oh, you're haunted, like. But a
No.
different
Oh, Jesus, no. No. Not that way. But it's that kind of thing where you go, what is that? And then you say, oh, there's nothing. So we have the ongoing debate, like, is it Daniel O'Connell stirring up stuff that, you know what I mean? Colonel Fitzgerald is like turning in his grave. Right. But they were like completely political opponents, like 100%. Daniel O'Connell went on record and completely slating the then George Washington, who was the first president of the United States, saying that he didn't understand why he didn't like free all his slaves. And thereon lies the debate and the story and the history. And that's why Daniel O'Connell is the liberator, as we call him. And we're very proud to have O'Connell's here today.
And we were talking earlier about the Liberator whiskey, which might eventually make its way onto the shelves in Daniel O'Connell's as well, alongside Clonakilty.
Right. Oh, and for sure, 100%. I'm looking for a personal invitation, by the way, so you can throw that out there to be flown home. Like, I know, now you're all VIP, right? I'll sit in coach, right? I don't need to do VIP. I'll serve drinks on the plane. Like, there's no problem at all. But I'd love to 100% have the Liberator whiskey here. It just would make complete sense. It really, really would. And so I'm excited to see it. And what's another thing is just like whiskey, it's becoming this new, and to old connoisseurs of whiskey, I'm sure it's like a little bit off color, but I mean, it is becoming a cool thing and great. You know what I mean? Let's highlight everything Ireland and everything that we have that's organically grown and we have at our fingertips. You know what I mean? It's right there for us. So as an Irish bar and restaurant here in Alexandria, Virginia, 100%, every time O'Connell's will support everything Irish, and especially a family owned and operated business as we are ourselves here. You know, there you go. We're not a corporation. You know, all the staff here have been here for over 10 years. So we really are a family. So that's another huge thing to, support.
What's the demand like for whiskey then, Niamh? Like, have you seen people's taste change? Are they asking for different whiskies than they would have done 5 years ago? What does it look like for you?
It actually has. And here's an interesting concept. And I had this conversation with Anne and Corrick, actually. I started this promotion for the month of April for whiskey women. And it basically was to highlight women-owned operated distilleries or women-owned distillers, because there's a lot more to whiskey than people genuinely think about it. Going through college, we all worked in bars and stuff like that, and I worked in a pub in Cork, and one of the main things, the old guys would come in, they'd have a pint and a drop, and the drop was always, Paddy's or Powers. And I again, this is just me in my viewpoint on it, but it's a case where you have an old man's drink, and it's not, you know what I mean? Yeah. People are really getting to understand the art, the whole thing about like whiskey distillery and all that kind of thing. So it's I know gin was the big thing there a couple of years ago at home. Definitely whiskey is taking over, as it should, because the process is like 1,000 years old. People have been doing it for years, and it's very exciting. There's all these new distilleries coming out with fabulous products like Clonakilty, and I'm genuinely not even joking. Like I became interested in whiskey because I'm not a whiskey drinker. Like I would be a gin drinker, and a wine drinker. So I was like, okay, how can I bridge that? Like, what do I need to do to understand a little bit more of what's happening? So I started talking and asking my bartenders and asking my guests coming in, do you drink whiskey? No, I don't. Why don't you? So when we started our Whiskey Women, women were like, yeah, I drink whiskey, kind of thing. It's like, so it's definitely starting to build momentum, and as it should though, because it's been around for a long time, and it'll be there well after us.
Yeah, when I was talking to Anne and Padraig a few weeks ago, we talked about having a bit of a session here tonight and drinking some single grain. And Anne said, "You'll have to have Niamh on. She's got some great stories about Clonakilty." And I said, "What's her connection with Clonakilty?" She said, "Well, didn't she go to school there? Didn't she go to boarding school?" I said, "There's a boarding school in Clonakilty." But that's true, isn't it? Oh, right. We lost your sound there, have we?
Yeah. No. Did you?
Can we hear you? I think we might have lost your sound.
Hello.
You can hear it?
Hello.
You can hear okay? Maybe it's me.
Okay. All right.
Oh, there we go. You're back. Oh, that's my fault.
It's a cold thing. Don't worry about it. No, I was in Clan boarding school in '84. Jesus, I'm showing my age now. Boarding school in Clonakilty, myself and my sister, and we had a wonderful experience with the nuns. They were wonderful ladies. God loved them. We put them through the ringer. I won't even lie to you. And there's many stories. And like I said, listen, everyone still lives at home. So I would be literally dragged through the streets of Clan if I were to actually mention really, really bad stories. But all I will say is we had beautiful midnight feasts. We drove the poor women mad, and we had a good time. It wasn't all just, study hall. You know what I mean? No.
Where is this school? Where is it in relation to the town?
It's literally as you come into Clan, as you're driving into Clonakilty, it's on the right-hand side. It's a magnificent building. Actually, not that long ago, I brought my boys there right before there was and actually would like people to actually let me know what's going on there right now if they have demolished it. I was terribly upset to hear that they were going to demolish the old building, which would have been the dorms where we all quote unquote lived in. Beautiful building, absolutely stunning building. But as you come into Clonakilty, you'll be on the right hand side, and then they had the new school that was built, you know what I mean, in the early 80s sometime. But yeah, it's a beautiful building. But yeah, so as you come into Clonakilty, it's on the right hand side. I mean, listen, we all have our Clonakilty boarding school stories. A lot of the locals who I'm still very friends with, and I do have to give a special shout out to one particular gentleman, not that he went to the all-girls boarding school, but a very good friend, Conor Quirk, who again is another rugby fan. So but there's just so many of us. We've all kept in contact. We literally have on our Facebook pages, I'm sure everyone has, the friends at Clonakilty boarding school, and we've stayed friends the whole bloody time, and supported one another, and which is wonderful. But yeah, I mean, what a gorgeous place to go to school, though.
Yeah, stunning place, beautiful town, and I'm sure the statute of limitations has run out on anything you might have done or any crimes you might have committed. So without giving away names, like, you're more than welcome to share.
Can you imagine? But can you imagine? Like, I know there's all the Facebook memes and funny stuff about, like, oh, well, if you grew up in this time, you didn't have like iPhones. Lads, we don't know how lucky we are. Like, we really, really don't. And thank God for that. No, thank God for it. But you know what I mean? It's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
Would you have sneaked out? Would you have sneaked out and kind of had any devilment in the town?
Yes.
You would.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can answer that very quickly. Absolutely, 100%. Yes. Yeah. Oh, there was a lot of shenanigans. There was, like I said, those poor women, though. I mean, the nuns, they had their work cut out for them with the whole lot of us. I mean, when you think of it, you've all of these young girls, you know what I mean? Yeah. So a lot of fun was had. We have a lot of great times, especially in the bars like the bars. So can't wait to when we can actually like travel back home again and travel down to Clon. I mean, bars is an institution, for Christ's sake.
It is, of course.
Would you have heard the
story of Tojo the monkey when you were growing up there, or you went to school in Clonakilty and crashing the plane in the fields and Tojo being celebrated?
What's that? With the monkey?
Yeah, Tojo the monkey is a Clonakilty story, and he arrived in an Air Force plane.
You know what, West Cork, you can't beat it. You can't bloody beat it.
There's a statue now to him. There's a statue to Tojo.
Of course there is. No, of course there's a statue. Of course there's a statue. But no, but it's just like the whole culture of Clon, though, is beautiful. You know, you have the best food, best restaurants, art, just shopping local and supporting local. And that's something that's who Clonakilty are. I mean, it's just, that's it, end of story. You know what I mean? And again, which is why, like, we're a family owned and operated business. So you want to support one another with the genuine highlight on service, customer care, having that connection, making everyone feel that they're at home, making everyone feel that this is their second home. You know, and it's just, so it was a no-brainer. The minute this walked in the door, I was like, Anne, we're done.
You're done. Today. Give us a little, move the camera around there and show us the Fitzgerald room. Give us a little spin around.
All right, I will. I'll walk around now here with you, Susie.
Brilliant. Live tour.
I have to make sure now, hold on, I have to flip the screen here, lads, because you're only going to be looking at my ugly mug.
Or you could just swivel it around in your hand. There you go.
Okay. So,
brilliant.
Alex, you say hi. There's Alex.
Hi, Alex.
Bartender. Oh. Hi, Stephanie. So you can see. Sorry, guys, you're live here on the live stream. Do you want to say hello?
Hey.
So we're open 7 days a week. And you can see we have a gorgeous restaurant here.
Beautiful.
You wave, say hi. Obviously, still with social distancing.
Yeah.
We're keeping the booths every other, just because obviously, even though Governor Northam has released a lot of the restrictions, we're still being very respectable and listen, because it could get out of hand very quickly.
I know. Lovely Powers mirror there. You've got your Powers mirror on the wall. Yeah.
Sure do. Look at that. Yep.
Flying the Irish flag. Yeah. Lovely.
You better believe it. 100%. So I would just say to anyone, honestly, if you're ever thinking of making a trip to Washington, D.C., please come see us in Old Town. Like, we're the home of Six Nations Rugby. We play all the rugby games. We have the best staff in the world. And I really mean that. Like, we're a committed family. I just try and, like, this is the vastness, the size of the place. Like, we have a massive restaurant and bar. So, oh, lovely pints of Guinness there going out.
Oh, look at those pints. Great pints.
Sorry, no.
There's a lot of people in Ireland dying for a pint. They're looking at those now and they're drooling, wondering when they can get a pint, like.
I know. And listen, what's going to happen there, lads? We need to send some vaccines over.
You send pints over. Could you arrange that? Pints in a box or something? A box of pints.
No problem. Yeah, absolutely no problem. But I do have to say honestly, thank you for the opportunity to like put a shout out. We're family owned and operated, like I keep saying. We're a small business, and this has been very tough, very, very hard 12 months for us. And
I'm sure.
love the fact that Anne, yourself and Hopper like Mad's the brush, love him to death.
He's
But
watching
he
right now.
literally gave us like,
Yeah.
he better be. Yeah, he better be. I got a lovely text of encouragement from him there about an hour ago. But no, honestly, it is about supporting each other, and we're all like, and I will say this, we're all the best at what we do, and we all work really, really hard to like do what it is that we need to do. But just thank you. Thanks for supporting us. And like I said, it was a no-brainer for me to jump on the bandwagon and say, like, I'll take all the line at Clonakilty. And I did have to say, it was like, we'll be the only Alexandria bar that has every line of Clonakilty Distillery. And that was the deal. That was the deal. But yeah,
Niamh, we're going to bring everyone up
exciting
to
times.
we'll bring everyone up to Alexandria when we can, and we'll have a lock in. You'll lock us into the pub.
I will. Yeah,
And we'll have a few whiskies and a few of those lovely pints when the time is right.
absolutely.
It's a great place that she has. It's one, when you go inside, Niamh, you were not doing justice to the size of this place. It's so big that you could get lost, and there's so many different twists and turns and rooms that you could get lost. So I had confidence that you could find a good place to set aside, where it wouldn't be too overwhelming. But it's a massive bar that is just full of heart. Everyone working there is absolutely amazing. And it's situated perfectly on this strip where they've cut off all street traffic to.
So it's pedestrianized.
It feels like what I can imagine. Look, I've never been to New Orleans, but it feels like almost, people are in the street and they're having a good time and they're drinking and partying in the street, and it's just, it's all socially distanced.
We always have to be. I was going to say we have to be very responsible here.
There's not people just going wild, of course, but they're able to. Thankfully, Virginia, the part of the town that they're in, they were able to expand into the street, and that's something I'm sure that all of us can relate to, is seeing our favorite bars and the opportunity that they get to expand into the street. So,
and Niamh, we know you have your hands full in there tonight, and we've got lots of people who want to visit when they're next in DC and they're next in the Virginia area. So you'll get people knocking on your door.
She told me that when she dropped off the bottle. 3 drinks on Anne. See the table over there, delighted with the news.
3 drinks.
Right, lads, 3 drinks on Anne.
We'll start a hashtag.
I told you I was trouble.
Don't let the rugby fans get a hold of that hashtag.
Oh, I know better. Trust me, I know better.
We know better.
Niamh, we're going to send everyone to your website and to your social media. Everyone go check out DanielO'Connells.com. Find them on Facebook and Instagram, and then find them in person, more importantly, so we can support pubs and bars and nice people doing good things, making lovely pints of Guinness and nice whiskies for us in tough times. So we should go and support. So Niamh, listen, Blanche, thanks a million for your time and joining us.
Thanks so much for including us. Absolutely. Cheers, lads.
Cheers, Niamh. Thanks a million. Blanche and Niamh.
Cheers, my love.
She's so much fun. I was there earlier. Brilliant. I didn't want to leave. If I had left one moment later, I'd be late. Like she's just so much fun to.
It's great to see the Irish hospitality crossing the ocean, and to make you feel closer to home, and get the Cork accent there in DC and Virginia, pouring pints and serving up the whiskies. To bring a tear to a glass eye, so it would.
It was interesting to hear about her journey towards acquiring the taste for Irish whiskey. I think this is something that we briefly touched on last time I was here, but acquiring the taste, not just Irish, but acquiring the taste for whiskey in general, when you come from a wine and gin background, which is exactly where I came from. It was a step-by-step thing. I wanted so badly, just like Niamh, to be able to enjoy the whiskey. And look at me now. I drink whiskey straight, like anyone, but
in VIP areas all over America.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes I do store tastings. I want to get out in the market and I want to connect with those people that are actually purchasing our product. So I'll do in-store tastings with customers, of course, socially distanced. And every time a customer tastes, I spray the air afterwards. I've got this nice aerosolized hand sanitizer spray. But it's always interesting to do those in-store tastings. And, sometimes you forget that I drank whiskey straight, and other people don't normally drink it straight. And so doing those in-store customer tastings has been really, really insightful. But how far we've come, right?
And you look, it's only 6 months since you started getting into Irish whiskey. Now look at you, like you're a convert. There's hope for more conversions to happen yet. You were mentioning there before we went to Niamh that there was another collaboration you were working on. What is this additional collaboration?
So it's interesting because she actually touched on it. So when I was there earlier today, I couldn't help but notice the Women in Whiskey collaboration that they're doing. So they're doing a Women in Whiskey feature where they feature, it's a special on 3 different whiskeys that are all produced or owned by women distillers. One of the whiskeys is Catoctin Creek. So I wanted to touch on that real quick. We're partnering with them. And we talked about that earlier. That was one of the reasons I was like having such a hard time leaving there, because we are doing that partnership with Catoctin Creek, and it's owned by a couple, Scott and Becky, both who started their careers in corporate America. They were doing the 9-to-5 thing, and they both looked at each other and they couldn't do it anymore. Becky was in chemistry and Scott was, I believe, in finance. Don't quote me on that, but we know that Becky was dealing with stuff that you would get into the whiskey industry if you were a chemist. And so she left all that. She is the master distiller for Catoctin Creek, and her husband Scott manages everything else. And so this amazing spirit that I absolutely love. By the way, I'm not sure if I mentioned, but it is 100% rye mash, 100% rye, and they do miracles with this. I often say, and the reason why I wanted to partner so badly with Catoctin Creek is because they have such a signature taste that you can taste it in a cocktail. You're not only like, oh, this is a rye, this is Catoctin Creek rye. I can taste.
You mentioned cherry. Did you say cherry earlier, like a cherry note to it?
Cherry cola, but I think what is more pervasive about the taste, what pushes through all the other notes, is this banana bread note. And the cool thing is, you walk into the distillery, and it's a small place. It used to be a car dealership way back in the day. It's in Purcellville. No, it's in Warrenton, Virginia. It's pretty deep into Virginia is what I'm trying to say. And so very, very small, very old town. It's on the main street, and it's so cute. It's exactly what you want from an old town. So you walk in, and it used to be this car dealership, and if you know that now, you can see it every time you walk in. But it just smells of banana bread. It's just such a rich, cakey smell, and you wouldn't expect that from a rye whiskey that is typically and nutmeg and spices that you might find in an apple cider. But it's such a small building that it's just incredible. It's just so incredible. Everything they do is magic.
Maybe you should we should do a virtual tour there when the Clonakilty Distillery whiskey releases out. Maybe we could do something virtual there.
Later on, when we start talking more about California and when this gets released, I think that would be such a good idea, and they would be 100% on board. And just sort of diving into now one of the interesting things was they started with Irish roots, so it would be, and that's one of the reasons why they were so on board with collaborating, being the large brand they're distributed through all 50 states, being the brand that they are. Discussing, their Irish roots and why collaboration makes so much sense.
Come back to us when you've got something in a bottle for us to look at and taste and enjoy, and looking forward to trying that. Jacob said all their rye is locally sourced too, he believes, which is good news. And yep.
Yeah, so so everything is everything that they are releasing is distilled by them, and so nothing is sourced, but the rye itself, the grain itself is sourced from local farmers, which is so important, and it plays an important role. I mean, the whiskey buffs in here will know that rye was associated with the DMV area long before bourbon was associated with the Kentucky area, and so it's something that predates Prohibition, and we're very happy to have a wonderful Virginia style rye here.
When does Clonakilty whiskey make its way to the West Coast then? When can we expect to see it out here?
So I'm going to be moving in late August. And so as soon as September, but of course, things take a little bit to get taken off and to push off. So I would say start looking for us in your local stores a month from then. So late September, we have to be in the market before October, November, December, because as, a little insider into the industry, we call that OND. And that's the most important time. So October, November, December, and then of course St. Patrick's Day. But so we'll be in stores in September.
In the meantime, if people want to find Clonakilty whiskey, you can go to their website, shop Clonakilty, isn't it? .com, and you can or just Google Clonakilty Distillery or Clonakilty whiskey, and you'll find the website. And single grain. I'm out of single grain. That's the end of my single grain journey tonight. And this has been informative and entertaining. And we've learned that you enjoy the VIP area of rugby games. And so we know where to find you. We learned about your new releases, which people went online and bought already, which is great. And we had a chance to go visit Alexandria and visit Niamh in Daniel O'Connell's pub. So this has been a treat. The grain whiskey is being discontinued. There's no more being sourced. So this, once it's gone, it's gone. So if you do enjoy it, as you can see I have, then I recommend you go out and get it. And
it'll be a collector's item.
Collector's item. Yeah, collected in my belly it'll be.
From the beginnings of Clonakilty, collected in your belly and collected in your in your memories.
Well, listen, Anne, thanks a million for joining us. I'm thrilled that we got to talk to you and we got to have a chat and learn about the next few months and those releases. I'm going to check out the Cask Strength Clonakilty because it's something that's there's a Cask Strength Clonakilty space on my shelf, so I'm going to need to. That's next on my list. And then come back and talk to us and let us know when you're in California. Hit us up. We might do some live events, some Clonakilty live events in California. In Southern California.
Should I post the link for the Cask Strength so that anyone else wanting to get a Cask Strength has the opportunity?
Is that the Old Glory link?
The Old Glory one. So it's only for the US.
Yeah.
We can't ship international, but
there's the link there.
Old
Glory DC. Old Glory DC. Go to the website, you'll see it on the homepage.
You got it there.
And you've been a rock star. Sláinte, thanks a million. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Thanks a million, Anne. Take care. Dave says, we bought them all. Good man, Dave. Dave's no man to turn down the opportunity at trying a new whiskey and supporting the Irish whiskey industry. I had intended to keep my Blackpitts till the very end, but I'm going to do a bold move and actually sample the peated whiskey before I'm sampling Tyrconnell 15-year-old. Michael Egan, brand ambassador for the Tyrconnell and for Kilbeggan, will be joining us in about 15 or 20 minutes. In the meantime, I thought it'd be a good chance to open the Blackpitts. Oh, wait a second now. He might be joining us right now. I might have to wait for my Blackpitts. But that was a great chat with Anne, and I'm excited for all these collaborations. Clonakilty have been very aggressive and very progressive in establishing connections and collaborations with established distilleries and breweries. And as you can see there, sports teams, they're the official whiskey of the of Old Glory as well, which is great to see. And a Cask Strength Clonakilty, you couldn't knock that. You couldn't knock that. So I'm going to check that out. Yeah, Watchman says, a very brave move trying the Teeling. Well, we'll put the Teeling on hold there because I see Michael is queuing himself up. He's getting ready. He came early because he was such a thirst on him that he joined early. Michael, we'll bring you in about 2 minutes. I'll get my Tyrconnell 15-year-old up next. All right, so if you have the Tyrconnell 15-year-old, a table full of whiskey, I can't find it. It is here. What segment are we moving on to now? I have to remember that we have segments. So this next segment with Michael will be our It's a Whiskey Business, all right. That's our segment. I forgot to add in the other segment when we had Niamh on, which was I wish I was in that pub. And we do all wish we were in that pub with those great pints of Guinness that she was horsing out there to everybody. The Tyrconnell, next up, single malt, 15 years old, Madeira cask finish. That's going to be our next whiskey. So I might as well pour a drop of that while Michael gets himself set up. Does anybody have the Tyrconnell 15-year-old, I wonder? Connor says, Barry and peated whiskey, the greatest 180 since angles were invented. Do you know, people have been very generous in suggesting and advising on which peated whiskies to try, like the Blackpitts there now. I'll be giving my kind of review on the Blackpitts when we get to it. But my palate is being opened up. My palate is being expanded. I'll never say no to a whiskey until I try it 2 or 3 times. And after 2 or 3 times, then I might say, all right, I'll come back in 6 months. When I first started drinking Irish whiskey, I hated Redbreast. Not because of the flavour or because I knew anything about whiskey, just because my palate wasn't ready for it. It took years for my palate to be sophisticated enough to even understand what whiskey was. And now, sure, we can't keep a Redbreast bottle full. MP had this earlier. He had some yesterday evening. Good man. And Dennis has got Tyrconnell and ginger. Good man. Greg, sadly, no Tyrconnell. And Marshall says he was too young in his Irish whiskey life to appreciate the Tyrconnell 15 when he had it. But I did kill my regular Tyrconnell early on in the stream. That's all right. As long as you haven't had a Tyrconnell or have tried a Tyrconnell, fair play to you. Fair play to you. Peter says, shame you can't get some old glory back to Ireland. Aren't there very creative people now in the world of Irish whiskey, working all kinds of back channels, figuring out how to get whiskey in each direction when they need it? Peter, I'm sure you could find people to help you now get that bottle somehow, whether it comes back in a suitcase eventually in a year or 2 or 6 months' time. I'd say if you bought the bottle and sent it to somebody in America, there'd be a way to get it to you. All right, so I think with that, we should go on to our next segment, which is It's a Whiskey Business, all right? And we're bringing in Michael Egan in Chicago. Michael, how are you, buddy?
How are we, Barry?
Are you well?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm great. I'm doing great. Michael, you kickstarted the musical segments on the lock-in back when we brought on Paddy Homan for the Kilbeggan lock-in last year, which was the start of something. You changed our world. You changed our lives for the better.
Paddy changes lives, Barry. That's what he does. I hope there's not an expectation now for me to continue that tonight.
I'm looking behind you there, see is there an old bowron or a guitar or something behind you, but there doesn't seem to be, just whiskey.
We could find something to play, to make a tune or two.
No better than
yeah.
How are you getting on in Chicago? How are things going? Is it opening up? Are things changing? What's happening?
Everything's great, thank you. It's slowly but surely opening up. Patio capacity and bar capacity is at almost, well, from what I see now, almost looks like 50%, which is fantastic. Thankfully, the weather is getting better. So our patios are getting a lot more full and people staying out longer on the patios and drinking and eating and socializing at a socially distant space. And then there's people getting more vaccinations, which is super. I got the email today that I have my second on Monday. So great. I'm delighted with that. And then, so everything's good. The sun is shining today and here we are for the second time in the lock-in.
It's nice to hear good news. It's nice to hear positivity. It was nice to hear. We just were live there from Daniel O'Connell's in Virginia, in Alexandria, and Niamh O'Donovan from Cork was joining us. And all we could hear in the background was chatter and conversation. And I think so many people in the audience stopped. They were like, wait, what's that sound? We haven't heard that in a long time. People in a pub.
I watched it from 6 o'clock and Anne and Niamh did fantastic. And Anne is superb for Clonakilty. Fair play to her. And Niamh was brilliant. I mean, I think it was Chris or one of the guys watching mentioned about the just the ambience and the background noise. I think that's something that I miss big time. And it's almost like I have a sound machine in the room and I play white noise at nighttime. There should be a little pub noise option on the sound machine, you know. Very soothing.
There's a website, isn't there? Steve shared a website earlier that you can play it back. He might put it back in the comments there to scroll back through. Geez, 100 200 comments there. But it's Irish pub sounds, I think, and you can just press play and listen to the pub in the background while you're doing your work, and put your heart at ease and your mind at ease, knowing it might come back again. You know, it will come back again.
We're nearly there. Yeah, we're nearly there. And you know what? I'm really looking forward to the day where we can confidently and comfortably book flights back home and go back and see family and friends, because it seems like they're a bit behind us, but mom and dad got their appointments today, which is good. So everything seems to be looking up, which is nice.
As long as we can keep moving in the right direction. Yeah, my parents got their first shot as well, which is great. We've had our first shot. We get our second shot now in a week and a half. And sure, look, hopefully that's the start of things to change and things to open up again. God knows we need a messy session with pints and pints spilled on our shoes and no recollection of the night before. We need those nights.
Barry, I might be wrong here, but I remember you saying that this time last year. So you're yearning for one here.
I mean, look, it's
the first lock-in live stream. You were like, "We need a good session."
I'm nothing if I'm not optimistic. Jeez, yeah, I never thought I'd be sitting here a year later going, "One of these days we'll have pints together. One of these days we'll have pints."
Yeah,
but
well, that's good. We're close.
We're close. We've had a few pints here now in California, socially distant pints, a few dirty pints of Guinness, but no messy sessions. Those are a while off yet, but at least you can have the pint. Like,
where's your local now in San Diego?
The Dubliner now would be the local. Isn't it the Dubliner? It is the Dubliner. Oh, the Field. No, the Dubliner's closed. The Field. Yeah, over on Fifth Avenue.
Over just in a local park.
Yeah, literally a field, like just grass. Like you just sit in the field and just drink.
That was my favorite local growing up as well.
Just surrounded by barley, corn, whatever you can find. Happy enough with the field. Bring a few cans. Mark says the second shot is brutal. Make sure you block out a day. Yeah, I'm ambitiously having a lock-in the night after the night of the second shot, so we'll see how we go. I might be slumped over the table. Like,
who are you having on that night?
If somebody who can carry the torch, somebody who can fly the flag. Michael, last time you were on, we did a deep dive into Kilbeggan, and we had a great old session. And as I've seen in the Facebook group over the last few months, more and more people are starting to find Kilbeggan, which is great, and discover it. And I'm hearing people enjoying Kilbeggan. One of the questions we've got asked quite a bit, and the reason I wanted to pick your brain and to hear from you tonight was people asking about the Tyrconnell, and it's now started to appear in different states. Ohio has got it now, and there's great excitement around it. I don't know a lot about the brand, and I've had only a very casual introduction to it, and I'm dying to hear some of the story behind it and the lineup and what's a permanent addition and what's not. No better man than yourself.
Yeah, I went through the drawers today and got out all the Tyrconnells I had. Changed my little back bar, and I have. You know what's cool? I actually, and it's funny because I know we're just speaking. We can speak to Oloroso and Muscatel and the other 16-year-old sherry cask finish and the other fortified wine cask finishes that we have. But the fact that we're speaking about Madeira tonight forced me to look into Madeira a lot more than I have in the last couple of years. Because you're right, over the last couple of years, our Kilbeggan distilling company focus has been Kilbeggan and growing that brand. And it's the brand, it's the name over the door. It's obviously Kilbeggan Distillery, and we've over the last 3 years, 2020 is a bit of a blur for everyone, but over the last 3 years, say we've launched 2 really exclusive LTOs from the distillery in Rye and Potstill, which you spoke about last May or June, almost a year ago. And but prior to that, we had about 2 years in 2016, 17, where all focus from Beam Suntory, because we're part of Beam Suntory now, was on the Tyrconnell. And it was amazing because it forced us as well, again, to do a deep dive into the history of that brand. And even though my knowledge of the brand was based on what I learned from legends like John Cashman and Noel Sweeney and in the industry and people who have worked on the brands a lot longer than I have, and then also the internet and everything you can find from a quick search online. But the fact that it was our number one focus for a year or two meant that we did a huge amount of research on the brand. And Barry, it's unbelievable how you there's Johnny, it's unbelievable how much I didn't know and how much people don't know. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that do know all of this history, but it's such a historic brand, has a glittered past, not just in Irish whiskey, but in global whiskey history.
And you shared some great pictures with me earlier today, and we have some of those to share as well. But would I be right in saying that, without the likes of visionaries like John Teeling, brands like the Tyrconnell would have been lost perhaps to history, and Kilbeggan even would have been lost to history? Yeah,
you're right. You're right to say that. John Teeling and amongst other individuals as well, like Willie MacArthur, is one that was a man that was pivotal in obtaining, say, the rights to the brand Tyrconnell, and then working with John obviously on the opening of Cooley acquisition and reopening of Kilbeggan, and launching Tyrconnell once again. So there was a number of individuals, but for sure John is a pivotal man. Willie and a few more, and I mean there's so many other individuals within the industry that are responsible, somewhat responsible for releasing new and old brands as well.
Okay.
But I mean the Tyrconnell is dates. We did it, as I said, through 2016, early 17. We deep dive into Tyrconnell, and we did a label relaunch, which is what you have the new label in front of you there. Well, on the new bottle, but this was, a lot of people watching might remember the old label.
Yep.
I have the sherry cask here in front of me. One thing you might recognize is the horse is running in the right direction now on the new label. Depends where you were sitting or watching the horse race. If you were like Anne, maybe you're in the VIP section on the inside track.
Is that why the horse had poor odds? He's running in the wrong direction.
Exactly. But it's a brand that dates back to the year 1762. Well, it's a story, I should say, that dates back to the year 1762. And the Watts family, so you see Andrew A. Watt, the Watt family are synonymous with the brand Tyrconnell and distilleries like Abbey Street and Waterside. And they became purveyors of fine spirits in 1762 in an area called Ramalton. And then in Derry in the year 1824, they opened their first brewery, and then moved their business into distilling in 1826 and opened up their first distillery called Abbey Street Distillery, which I'm sure a lot of us, if we know a little bit about Irish whiskey history, you would have heard of Abbey Street. It was a huge distillery. But the Tyrconnell itself as a brand and as a name wasn't really born until 1876. So a number of years after the distillery was opened. And I mean, we could speak for days. It's funny, I know you're out in California, we actually leaned on a script writer and historian called Ryan Rowe. And if ever Ryan, I'd love to meet Ryan one day. He lives out in LA. Ryan is, I believe, responsible for writing the Charlie's Angels series or whatever. But anyway, Beam commissioned him to go back, and Ryan and I worked very closely together, but we've never met. And I look forward to one day to raising a glass of Tyrconnell with him and toasting or a pint or something, because he flew back to Derry and in 2016 and did a massive amount of research on the Tyrconnell brand itself. And it was all commissioned by Beam, because we needed to make sure that everything that we were saying about the brand obviously was factual and true. And he came back, and I have on the computer, I found it this morning, it's about a 250-page document on the Tyrconnell and everything baked into its history. From 1762 and the Watt family, when they opened up their first store in Ramalton, they moved their business into milling from just collecting fine spirits into milling and mashing, opened up a brewery, then a distillery, and then all the way up to 1871 when they opened up Waterside Distillery, which was a smaller, in comparison to Abbey Street, smaller distillery. And that's ultimately where Tyrconnell was made. And then straight through all the way up to 2013, when Cooley and Kilbeggan were acquired, or the Tyrconnell was acquired by Beam Global at the time. A massive amount of research.
That's a book waiting to happen, or a movie.
100%. Yeah, it could be a movie. I know Anne mentioned, I mean, let me know if you want me to dive into it all, because I could speak for an hour on it. But
why don't we start with a bit of whiskey in our bellies, and then let's tell a few stories, because I'm dying to get people to sip on this Tyrconnell 15-year-old, and then let's talk a bit more. Otherwise, we'll only die of the thirst, and that's no good to anyone.
Well, I have to open mine. You know what's cool? I have in front of me a Tyrconnell original, and then we did in Whiskey Fest San Francisco a few years ago. We did when we first launched the 15-year-old Madeira cask. I had a seminar at Whiskey Fest, and we did like a Madeira 15-year-old Madeira deconstruction, where we got sent over to us a unaged Tyrconnell, so just new make spirit off the still before it hits the barrel. Then I had the 10-year-old Madeira, or I had the original, the 4-year-old original Tyrconnell, then the 10-year-old Madeira cask finish, and then the 15-year-old Madeira that we're going to try right now. So it was a nice progression through the whiskies of Tyrconnell and then the Madeira finish.
Is this a permanent part of the lineup, Michael, or is this a limited release?
It's a limited release, Barry. Like the 16, I confess I had a bit of that when Niamh and Anne were chatting, but we had the 16-year-old release. So in 2016, we released Tyrconnell 16-year-old, and that's 16 years in bourbon barrels, and that was an LTO as well. Then in 17, we released the or was it early 2017? Anyway, 16 or very early 2017, like January, we released the 16. Then 2017, we released this 15-year-old Madeira cask finish. And then in 2018, we launched the Oloroso and Muscatel. So 16 years and finished in Oloroso and Muscatel, which is right behind me here, which is a fantastic cask finish as well. But I'm not. I promise you, I'm not just saying that because I'm here with you tonight and we're tasting this. But Madeira is without a doubt my favorite out of the whole lineup, and it's probably our sherry and port are the best of the three. Say of the three 10-year-old cask finishes, sherry and port are the best sellers. Madeira comes in third.
Is that right?
I mean, I know probably sherry and port are used a lot more in terms of cask finishes in whiskey than Madeira would be. Definitely up until a couple of years ago. But it's I prefer even the color on this versus like a dark 16-year-old finish like the Oloroso and Muscatel is quite lighter, and it lends those beautiful kind of baked fruit notes. It's only finished for 3 months in the Madeira casks.
So ex-bourbon, so bourbon for the first 15 years, 15 and a half years, and then, or 16 years maybe? Sorry, 15 years.
So 15 years and then Madeira for 3.
Okay.
3, yeah, and I remember like I always got caught up with this on when I still do sometimes, to be honest with you, but when I first started with Beam and Cooley and Kilbeggan, and I remember Noel Sweeney saying, who was responsible for, now we have Sarah Dowling now, who's our blender and distiller, but Noel was responsible for, say, the 50, for laying all these whiskies down. And Noel used to always say, it's ready when it's ready. And when you're working with a finish like this, it's difficult to put a definitive time frame on the actual finish, because you're not looking to get just a 15 and 3 months or 15 and 5 months. It's all about the flavor profile and what that cask can do to the 15-year-old whiskey that it's being put into. So it's ready when it's ready. You look like you're ready to have it up.
I'm ready to. My nose has been sticking into it there now for a few minutes. Double distilled single malt.
Double distilled single malt, so 100% malted barley. This guy is made, like all of our Tyrconnell range, at Cooley Distillery, which is about an hour north of Dublin, on the foothills of the Cooley Mountains. And it's so we actually double distill everything at Cooley and Kilbeggan. So a lot of Irish whiskey is triple distilled. We double distill everything, and that goes back to a decision made by the likes of William MacArthur and John Teeling back in late 1980s, 1987 and 89 to start that process off. And we find that it means that there's a lot of flavor retention there, closer to the original mash. So double distilled, 100% malted barley, and then 15 years in ex-bourbon and 3 months in those Madeira casks.
Oh, the nose is so orchard fruits, hard sweets, hard candy, brown sugar. It's a little bit of licorice even on the nose.
I get a lot of baked. It's funny, like baked apple, hazelnut notes. Cooley, and again, I remember even all the distillers at Cooley talking about the DNA, and I think I might have mentioned this when we spoke about Kilbeggan Original last year. But the DNA of Cooley is green apple, and that's yielded from like the big two twin 16,000 litre pot stills, and it's a light fruity distillate that comes off, and that's evident in a lot of the whiskies produced. So Connemara, whether it's a Kilbeggan blend that we're making from Cooley, or Connemara or Tyrconnell, you get that green apple citrus DNA, and that's evident here. And then obviously the Madeira plays a beautiful role.
Oh, it's a beautiful nose to it. It's rich, isn't it? It's both. There's both a lightness of the orchard, of the apples. To me, it's hard sweets. Like I can't get past this. Like sugar sculptures used to make these wonderful sugar sculptures. They cook the sugar, and the smell from them is exactly what I get here on the nose. Yeah, we should take a sip of it, I suppose.
We should.
Sláinte.
Cheers. It's great to see you, Barry.
You too, Michael.
And I think it's gorgeous. I think it's funny. So earlier on, as you introduced Anne, I poured a drop of Tyrconnell, the 10-year-old Madeira, and so you almost get the Madeira hit before you even taste the whiskey on your palate, which is lovely. It's and then the whiskey hits you, and it's thick biscuits. It's creamy, and I don't know, but I think what you think, but through the 10-year-old finishes, Madeira port sherry, the original, the 16s and the 15, there's that green apple, and that's the DNA, which I always go back to as the kind of DNA, and then the spin from the Madeira casks is phenomenal.
I get the apple more on the nose than I do on the palate. On the palate, then I get the kind of a strong cereal note, a malt note on the palate. I get a not overpowering sweetness. Like it's not a super overly rich, complex sweetness. It's kind of a light sweetness to it.
Yeah, it's certainly a tasty one. And I remember when we launched this back in 2017, we got samples shipped over from Cooley to the Merchandise Mart, which is where our offices are down in Chicago. And there was samples shipped with, and this is just, again, me going back to Noel's point of it's ready when it's ready. There was samples shipped at 3 months in Madeira casks, and then samples shipped at, I think it was 6 or 8 or maybe a year in Madeira casks. And the 3 was just so much better. Then unanimous decision across the board of everyone in the room was that I like A versus B. It wasn't an age. We didn't know what it was. But it just goes back to age doesn't always mean quality, and just because it's in a barrel longer doesn't mean it's better. What
was the difference? Was the Madeira too much of an impact? Was it overpowering the whiskey?
Yeah, for sure. It was as we're always told by our blending team that it's a finish. It's not supposed to be a Madeira whiskey. It's supposed to be a 15-year-old Irish whiskey in bourbon cask finished in Madeira cask. So with a hint of flavor from the Madeira barrel. If you leave it in there too long, obviously that's going to impart too much, or maybe a little too much flavor, and will take away from what the original sort of recipe was supposed to create.
That's a great note there from Steve. Cinnamon, red delicious apple on the nose. As soon as you read red delicious apple, you can't but get red delicious apple on the nose. Like it's like absolutely a juicy apple, like that, a crunchy, juicy red apple. Absolutely. Yeah. Good one.
Love it. I like the morning porridge as well.
Yeah. Pour it into your morning porridge.
Yeah.
Your maple syrup.
Yeah. We used to always say, because we actually did an event a few years ago where there was a hangover brunch after Paddy's Day where we had porridge and we had Tyrconnell drizzled over the oatmeal for the porridge. Yeah. So it worked very well.
We should have a morning lock-in.
Yeah. I'm sure you've had some that have gone well into the morning. Maybe not San Diego time.
Yeah, no. Normally, like, it's the poor Irish girls and lads who at 3 o'clock in the morning find their way to bed after a session here. But meanwhile, it's only 7 o'clock for me when I have to wrap things up here. So I still have the evening ahead of me. Like,
and you know what? And that's great. And it was funny. We went for, Kristen and I were chatting yesterday about this, and she was asking about the evolution of the lock-in once things start to open back up, and it's. I mean, you're driving the ship, but for me, it's exciting to think of where you could bring it. You know, is it a traveling? Is there an option to go and do a lock-in from a pub? Go to work with Niamh and do something, you know, from the bar, or
what should we do? I mean, you tell us, like, what do you think we should do?
I mean, I don't know if I follow on a podcast the two Johnnies, you know, the boys from home, and they did a couple of podcasts, of a traveling podcast in Australia, and my little sister went to their one in Melbourne, I think. But yeah, man, I think there's a deadly opportunity to do the lock-in live stream at and attend one, you know, and do an exclusive tasting of something. I love it.
I think that's the evolution. I think I'd like to do some things live in places, and it's time to see the whites of people's eyes, you know, not just see their comments on the side of the screen. It'd be nice to clink glasses and to shake hands when we're allowed to shake hands. Yeah, I think that would be a nice evolution. But it's great to see, like, I'll post during the week that we're doing the lock-in, and we'll invariably get comments that say, great, I'm getting my whiskies, I'll see you on Friday. And then other people will say, and now we've seen it now, especially now in the last month or two, people are saying, actually, I'm going out Friday night, I'm going to support the bar, we have a chance to go out, and that's brilliant, you know. And that's really, I mean, the lock-in doesn't exist to be a lock-in, it exists to bring people together. And if we can bring people together, or they're able to find ways to get together in person, then there may not be the need for this virtual component all the time.
Yeah, but it's always nice. I mean, it's always nice on a Friday evening just to, even if Kilbeggan, Tyrconnell, or any of our brands don't have anything going on with it, it's always nice to tune in and see what's going on. So it's all, for me anyway, I can only speak for myself, that it's become a Friday evening. Let's check in and see who's on and what's going on and what the crack is like.
It's been a nice kind of it's held me accountable too over the last year, where, you know, we're working from home, we're living at home, we're out in California. We don't really know very many people out here. We moved out here just before this all hit, and there'd be the danger to kind of let the week slip, or you'd get demotivated. But the fact that there's a thing you have to do every Friday night, you know, I think we've missed two of them in a year and a quarter. It's something that has forced my hand to, you know, get motivated. Come on, you got to get it together now. Like, you got the lock-in to put together. Let's get the guests, you know, let's get the whiskies. We got to do this.
That's great. That's fair play. Really, yeah. That's, I know, it's great fun. This
evolves and it gets sweeter for me now. It's changing. It's opening up. I'm getting more of that hard sweets, that hard candy, that boiled sweet taste now on the finish as it just sits there, and maybe I'm warming it up with my hand. I don't know, but it's lovely. It really is a lovely single malt.
Yeah, it's and it was one of I mean, there was a number of cask finishes that were up for, like, we really sat down and said, right, is it Madeira? Is it a sherry cream? Is it another type of sherry? What are we releasing as this launch? And it was just, again, back to that, to the point a minute ago about the unanimous decision in the office in the merchandise mart. It was like, this is 3 months old in Madeira, and this is by far the best option that we have. And it's done very well, Barry. It's still an LTO, so it's not being made and released on an annual basis, but there's still 15-year-old Madeira finish out there to get.
I had never seen it anywhere in the US until 2 weeks ago. I think I messaged you after I bought it. I found it in a Total Wine in California, and I'd never seen it anywhere before. And I snapped it up immediately. I thought, very unusual to find it. But is Total Wine the only distributor for it, or can it be found elsewhere as well, or the only retailer?
No, elsewhere for sure. You know what? It goes back to the nature of being part of a big organization like Beam, and we're so fortunate on many fronts that we have a sales distribution, and we have a network like to lock into like Beam have. And then it's a double-edged sword, because on the other side, we're not a huge brand within Beam, so we don't get the share of attention in huge markets that we might do if we were a smaller brand going in on our own. So California, for instance, we have 5 focus markets for this year. So upstate New York, PA, we have Illinois, Colorado, and Oregon, Portland, Oregon. So they're big focus markets for us. In saying that, the whiskey is widely available across the states, and so we're distributed through Southern and a number of other distributors in the states, but mostly Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. And so you'll find it in a lot of places. Like yesterday when I was going to grab this bottle, there's a new liquor store that opened up around the corner. So I just popped in on my way to. I was going to the Binny's, the Total Wine of Chicago, and I popped into Garfield's and chatted to Dave, this guy who was working there, and lo and behold, looking at me on the shelf was a 15-year-old Madeira finish. It was like brilliant. This is my new favorite store. Yeah. So it is available. It's just we'd be the first to say that we have a lot of work to do on distribution across the states for sure, which is not bad.
Ohio just came online, which is great to see. Steve says he can find them all in Colorado Springs. Jeff says they're all available in Indianapolis, which is good. And Jacob says a few Binnies have it as well. So you're probably far more widely available than I had any clue about. I was just delighted to find it. Where did the name go?
Though, if I can say very quickly, even though we are part of a big massive company, we're small enough to the point where when I hear that, when it's available in Colorado Springs and Binny's, as Jacob says, in all of these stores, it's a little a nod of success. And yes, there's probably the expectation that we should be everywhere because we're part of a big company, but it's not really how it works. And every win for us is a huge win.
Michael, share with the audience some of the other brands that are part of that family, the Beam Suntory family. We tend to forget sometimes that there are stablemates in some of these portfolios that we don't hear about them. We focus so much on Irish whiskey, and we forget who else might be part of the company, might be part of the family.
For sure. So we got acquired by Beam Global back in 2013. So I moved over to the States in very early 2013, and it was and it is still amazing to be associated with massive globally recognized icons like Jim Beam, obviously the name over the door, Beam Suntory. Now in 2014, Suntory and Beam merged, so we have all of our Japanese whiskeys, so Yamazaki, Hakushu, Hibiki. Then we have tequilas within the portfolio. I presume you're talking about other whiskeys, not just the Irish whiskeys. Yeah. Because I'll go on a tangent here now, speaking about everything. But we have like Cinco de Mayo coming up, in 2 weeks' time, next week, and it's deadly to have brands like Cornitos, El Tesoro, Tres Generations, all these tequila brands that, from our point of view, from an Irish point of view, if there's tequila events going on, we're the small guys going, hey, do you need an Irish whiskey to help pump up that event, or how can we do a tequila Irish debate or something like that? So we're jumping on the bandwagon on these. And then bourbon, I mean, Jim Beam, Knob Creek, Maker's Mark, Booker's, Basil, Hayden's, Baker's, Courvoisier, big. And then Scotch, we have Lafroig, Bowmore, huge globally recognized brands that we're lucky enough to be associated with.
That's incredible.
But I should say that all of them are lucky enough to be associated with Kilbeggan as the oldest continuously licensed distillery in the world.
Get that in. Fair play to you. And the Japanese side of things, I'd imagine, obviously Suntory, a huge part of the company. Japanese whiskey getting a lot of attention in the last few weeks and months as they start to put in place some structure to their labeling and to their definitions of what Japanese whiskey can be. What does that do for the company, or what does that do for? Is there an impact on Irish whiskey based on what's going to happen in the Japanese whiskey industry, do you think?
Well, that was big news recently when they had the technical file on their labeling. I mean, I'd love to, in terms of how we can kind of lean on our Japanese cousins to maybe bring out some innovative Irish whiskies and innovative styles of whiskey. For sure, and we have. I mean, a Kilbeggan single grain, not a lot of people know about it, is a collaboration of the blending teams in Scotland, Japan, and America, and Ireland. and coming up with the cask finishes of and the amount of time finishing those barrels. But yeah, we're working with our blending, and Japan is known for its blending. We're working with those guys on possibly securing Mizunara casks and whatever we can get from them. But for sure, any learnings that we can get from Japan, and as their technical file or labeling, the file around, or technicalities around labeling tightens, that's only going to make, I think, Japanese whiskey better. And as a result, if we can learn from that, I'm talking about Kilbeggan within Beams and Joy, can learn from that, then we're better for it for sure.
How does the Cooley brands like Tyrconnell, Kilbeggan, how do they manage to wave their arms fast enough and shout loud enough to get attention and focus in a company so big, where there might seem like more global priorities than Irish whiskey or than these brands? Like, is there a future for these brands in the overall portfolio?
It's a super question, Barry. And I always go back to the line of the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So we are, of course. I mean, we're small brands within a big company, and I mean, it's like it's like Pernod Ricard, right? So Jameson is a huge brand within Pernod. So if Jameson has a bad year, Pernod mightn't have a fantastic year, and we're at the point where if Jim Beam, Maker's Mark, if some of our big massive priority brands don't succeed, then Kilbeggan as a result won't succeed, or Kilbeggan Distilling Company, so Tyrconnell, Connemara included. In saying that, we definitely we're arguably one of the most, definitely in the top 5 or 6 most awarded in terms of whiskey awards portfolios of whiskey within Beam Suntory. So every year we have these accolades and these awards to bring to the company and say, hey, look at what we've done on this with this much attention. But you're right in saying that there's constantly we're constantly in the position to say, hey, look at what we can do. And what's great is over the last couple of years we've done phenomenal work without that attention. So it's kind of like, do we want to keep growing and doing what we're doing and under the radar, or do we want the light of Beam Suntory to shine on Irish and say, right, show us what you can do? Then we're really under pressure to perform. But it's always that constant battle between trying to get as much attention as we can, yet trying to grow organically or with fans that have discovered our Irish whiskies on their own, really.
Well, you see the likes of Pernod Ricard and their portfolio brands, and even within Irish Distillers and their portfolios, like Irish Distillers has a brewery, like 8 Degrees Brewing, where they do their collaboration with Cask Mates, and now with Crested, Irish Whiskey has collaborations, where they're coming out with special release finishes for Crested Irish Whiskey, and there seems to be some collaboration within the portfolio in terms of the barrels might head back from Middleton to maybe Havana Club and things like that. But it would be great to see more usage and interplay of the brands in the portfolio, whether that's, like you mentioned, Mizunara casks perhaps being extracted out of Japan and brought over and used for Irish whiskey maturation, or other things that still fit within the technical file of both countries. But wouldn't it be fun to see more happening on that side?
100%, yeah. And I think even at its simplest level, in terms of barrel selection or whatever, and who releases barrels to go to Ireland from Kentucky, say, we have an amazing opportunity to say, right, let's collaborate with not like the likes of Independent Stave or big companies like that in Kentucky, but internal maturation or blended teams within Knob Creek, Basil, Jim Beam, whatever you like, and actually go over and hand select casks. And now we know that the barrels we're getting over to Cooley and Kilbeggan are top quality because they've been selected to mature some of the big brands that we were part of. But to go over and actually collaborate on what that looks like would be amazing.
When was the last time you visited the distillery?
Christmas 2019, which is mental that it's a year and a half ago.
Long time.
As I said, the last year was just a blip.
It's like Guinness. Like I've heard that the further away you get from the distillery and the longer it is, that the the worse you become at talking about whiskey, a bit like Guinness, the further from the Liffey, you know, the worse it tastes. So like you have to get back there. Otherwise, you got to top up the knowledge, you know.
You know what's funny though, like, and I might have said it to you in June or July, but as we feel geographically further apart and we haven't seen each other in so long, I genuinely think that our teams have grown, and this might be a bit cheesy, but have grown closer. And because we've been forced to do all of these virtual and happy hours and educational sessions and stuff. So we've actually seen our teams at Cooley and Kilbeggan a lot more than over the last year, a lot more than we would in a typical year.
Yeah.
So granted, we might be there to taste the whiskey from the casks and touch and see and smell the production process. We've gotten to know the people behind that a lot better.
Yeah, it's changed so many people's working lives, social lives, culturally. I was reading an article in the New York Times during the week about how what's happened over the past year is the biggest societal and cultural shift for us since World War II, and how that changed how we operated and how we consumed and bought and lived, etc. And now this would be the next huge cultural shift, and we're seeing it in so many aspects of life. And the whiskey world is not in any way exempt from those changes, like how we work and how things have been released or haven't been released. It's changed a lot, and some things for the better, but some things for the worse, sadly.
But you know what? Yeah, you're right. But I was even counting today because I had to do the KPIs. But I was like, over the course of the 31 days of March, I think we did. What's Dave saying?
I'll get to this one. I'll put this up here. I'll answer it. Dave answer. Stirring the pot. We'll get to it.
For the 31 days of March, I think I did 17 virtual trainings, virtual events, which is amazing because you wouldn't be able to do that in a normal March or a normal month. Because to be one day you'd be dialing into San Diego or California, and then an hour later you're on to Washington, DC, or wherever it is. So it's given us, and granted, it's not ideal, and you'd like to be visiting these places and shaking hands and seeing people, but it's given us an opportunity to chat to so many more people, which is I suppose there's a positive there somewhere.
That's a huge positive. I think that's one of the big things to be taken away, is that brands are now meeting people where they are, as opposed to asking the people to come to where the brands are, or I've heard many stories of brand ambassadors flying over to the United States and spending a week to do a whistle stop tour of America, and one night will be spent in one bar where maybe 6 people turn up, and that's a big investment of somebody flying over from Ireland for a week and being put up in hotels, and 6 people turn up at a bar for a tasting. Whereas, like you've seen, you'll get 50 or 100 or 1,000 people on a tasting virtually, which is has got to be a huge advantage to brands.
Absolutely, yeah, and you know what? There's not that cost there of traveling. So if there is 6 people showing up to your tasting virtually, so what? And give it socks, and if you can do it as good as you would if there's 100 or 200 people on it, that's it, because you're just sitting at your kitchen counter in front of your microwave doing a tasting.
Dave's question is prescient, because there's lots of talk this week and last week about different flavors in the world of whiskey, especially Irish whiskey. So his question is, why doesn't somebody make a peanut butter flavored Irish whiskey? I know he's having the crack, but it's a good point, because there cannot be a flavored Irish whiskey by law. There's no such thing as a flavored Irish whiskey. There can't be a flavored Irish whiskey. The only flavor a whiskey can have is the flavors that are inherent to the grain, the cereal, and whatever is imparted from the cask. But it can't move away from the flavor profile that a whiskey should have. Like, I think there was famously a whiskey, I remember it when it was released, I think it was 1997, it was Bailey's Irish whiskey, and it lasted on the market for, I think, a few weeks, and then it was pulled because I think the Scotch Whisky Association said, well, hold on a second, you can't have a whiskey that's flavored. We can't, you can't. And so when we're seeing these new releases like Jameson Cold Brew and Jameson Orange, they're not actually flavored Irish whiskeys. They're a spirit that contains a flavoring and that contains Irish whiskey. And it's a small kind of, in words, it's a small difference, but practically and factually, I suppose it's a big difference that you can't have a flavored Irish whiskey. Would I be right in that, Michael?
Yeah, bang on. And you're right. There's always kind of on the technical file, there's always labeling ways to get around it if you want. And I'm sure as the category grows, there might be if there's orange, if there's cold brew, if there's something on the label, there might be a way to kind of wordsmith your way around a peanut flavor or whatever it is, Irish whiskey style. And that's, I don't know if you were to ask me, is there something wrong with it? Yeah and no. I think there's consumers out there, if someone wants to create some sort of style of Irish whiskey that's not a genuine Irish whiskey, but it's an Irish whiskey style with some sort of flavoring in it. There's definitely appetite there for it.
There is, and I think you've studied enough of the history of Irish whiskey to realize that when companies don't adapt and don't change and don't evolve to perhaps evolving tastes and evolving trends, then they could maybe become out of the, they could ruin themselves very quickly and become obsolete before they even know it. Yeah,
without a doubt. And I mean, I briefly scanned over an article this morning or yesterday morning about Southern Glazers, one of our big distributors in cannabis, and what they're doing there. And I just think even small things like, well, big things like the Constellation canopy growth kind of deal, and what's going on in that field is going to change whiskey and spirit and spirits. So I think if you're right, if you're complacent, if you're stuck in the mud and you're stringent and strict on what you're doing, you might get left behind. Or you might be a very classical old brand that everyone loves forever, and that's ideal too.
That's true. And I think brands like the Jamesons of the world have the brand advantage of, if they just put the word Jameson on a bottle, people will automatically assume it's Irish whiskey anyway, whether it reaches the 40% ABV or it complies. Technically, they don't have to just make whiskey. They can make spirit drinks, as is what these are. Yeah. Steve has a question. Were the Bushmills honey and Paddy Stinger and apple labeled as liqueur? I think so. Was it a liqueur or a spirit drink, perhaps? Yeah.
That's it. And Paddy, and what was the other? There was Paddy Stinger. Wasn't there a trilogy of releases or two?
There was, yeah, definitely two of them anyway. Stinger and apple. Maybe those were the two. Were they Stinger and apple? What was that? Cinnamon?
Wasn't there honey?
Bee Sting. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, Bee Sting labels liqueur. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There's a market. Rebecca's showing us there's a market. She's looking for more. So yeah, there's definitely a market for them.
Yeah.
And no,
I'll make a concoction for you, Rebecca, here with Tyrconnell 15 and a bit of honey. See what it tastes like.
Stick on the post. I was going to ask you earlier the name for Tyrconnell. Then there's a good story to that. Like, as we're having our sips, the sips need an old story. Tell us the story of the horse, the story of the name on the bottle.
Absolutely. So it's funny. Anne, I think it was Anne mentioned the column still or continuous still, and I forget where the conversation was going at that stage. But did you know that Andrew A. Watt, when they opened up Abbey Street Distillery, was one of the first distillers in the world. In fact, I think the first to adopt the column still and the coffee still. So as Aeneas Coffee was making his way around Ireland trying to sell his new distillation method and technique, it was turned, a lot of the Irish distillers turned their noses up to it and refused to adopt it. But Andrew A. Watt and Abbey Street Distillery knew that this was an opportunity for him to massively increase output, decrease cost, because the big old pot stills were very labor intensive and not very cost effective. And so he adopted it. And the first, from what we read in this 250-page document that Ryan gave us, the first distillery in the world to adopt the column still, which is pretty cool. And that's a method of distillation that's used around the world right now.
Yeah.
So fast forward then from the 1830s, when that was, up until 1876. And you know what's funny? So Andrew A. Watt. So if you look on the label of Tyrconnell, if you have it in front of you, the new label on the bottom right under established 1762, it says Andrew A. Watt. On the older label, it says it just on the bottle, on the bottom of the bottle. And so that refers to the grandfather of Andrew A. Watt that I'm talking about right now. So every grandchild in this family was called Andrew A. Watt. And if you go through, I'll share it, Barry, if you want, but this 250-page document, it's
love to see it.
A.A. Watt, it's very confusing to go through the family. But you know what? People are named after their grandfather, great grandfather, whatever. So A.A. Watt established Waterside and Abbey Street Distillery, and then he passed away, and his grandson, Andrew A. Watt, was born and turned 23 in the year 1871. All right, and he was his father. Sorry, it was his father, A.A. Watt, that passed away, and he was being taken care of by his uncle, David Watt. And he turned 23 in 1871. It was the same year that David Watt passed away. All right. So in 1876, so 5 years later, Andrew A. Watt, at the age of 6 or 25, took control of the whole distilling.
Oh, we lost Michael, did we? He'll jump back in there. The old internet connections can affect us. Hopefully you can still hear me okay. But we'll bring Michael back in there now when he joins. I'm still sipping on the Tyrconnell 15-year-old, enjoying it. Lovely malty. There's a kind of a spice showing itself through now in the malt that goes lovely with that malt cereal note, and then that lovely hard sweet, that hard candy showing up as well. I'm loving it, enjoying it. If you can, hopefully my connection is still sharing and you're able to hear me all right. If you are, let me know. Give me a thumbs up, and then Michael will join us again. Or are we disconnected? Oh, here we go. Boom. Michael's back in.
Sorry about that, Barry.
Grand, I was wondering if I'd gone, if I'd cut the feed or something there.
Let me,
Boom.
I didn't pay the internet bill.
You know what? It's been a tough year. It's been a tough year for everybody. We understand. Times are tough. Costs are, you got to spend your money carefully. Like.
That's okay.
You can hear me okay?
You can see me, yeah?
Yeah, we can see you. Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. So I was saying, Andrew A. Watt took control of the distillery and the distilling company, so Abbey Street, Water Street, or Abbey Street and Waterside Distillery in the 1870s. His uncle that was taking care of him, David Watt, passed away in the early 1870s, and believe it or not, he fell off a horse and passed away. So we don't know, in this 250-page document, we don't know if this was the reason why the Tyrconnell was chosen as the name associated with the best-selling whiskey from Watt's distillery. So anyway, in 1876, a horse named the Tyrconnell was running in the Irish National Produce Stakes, which is the equivalent to our Kentucky Derby, say. And he won. So the story goes, he won at 100-1 against all odds. And it was a landslide win and everything was rosy. But in actuality, and as my dad says, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. But in actuality, he won. And this was Ryan came back with a 250-page document and crushed our dreams of continually telling the story. But it was actually 16-1, which is still a nice win. Which is still a nice win, but certainly not 100-1. And but anyway, he named the horse was named Tyrconnell, and Andrew A. Watt adopted this brand and took it on board, changed his best-selling whiskey, which was Watt's malt whiskey, to the Tyrconnell, and the whiskey grew to the point of global notoriety. Barry, it was one of the best-selling whiskeys in the US pre-Prohibition. And we know that almost 60% of whiskey sold here in America was Irish before Prohibition. And this was the #1 selling Irish whiskey, which is amazing. There's stories of the Tyrconnell branding on billboards across the old Yankee Stadium, the Polo Grounds, in throughout the 1919 World Series, I believe it was, with shoeless Joe Jackson. So it grew to the point where Abbey Street and Waterside Distillery were one of the biggest distilleries in Ireland, producing, I believe, between Abbey Street and Roe & Co in Dublin, George Roe Distillery, they were two of the biggest Irish whiskey producers and sellers around the world, certainly in Ireland for sure. So it's a storied brand. and took the world by storm. And then, like a lot of other Irish whiskey distilleries, it fell to the unrelated events like war in Ireland, prohibition, the temperance movement, say, in Ireland, and the US was completely shut off, and that was the number one, obviously, export market for the Tyrconnell. And in the early 20s, the distillery was hit with fire, was forced to shut its doors. And I shouldn't say beautiful, but there's a great backstory into they in order to bolster toward the end of the 1800s the sales. Andrew A. Watt and the Tyrconnell, so Abbey Street Distillery and Waterside Distillery, actually joined forces with two other distilleries around the area in the north of Ireland, and they formed UDL, which is United Distillers Company Limited, and they increased their export quota. And Tyrconnell was continuing to be one of the biggest brands around Irish whiskey. But when Prohibition hit, it was forced to shut its doors. And there's a great story in the early 1920s of Andrew A. Watt rolling up in his Rolls Royce, his yellow Rolls Royce, to the doors of Abbey Street, and they were shut by the employees. And he stood up on the bonnet of his Rolls Royce and told them to open the doors, and they said, "Shut they are, and shut they shall remain." If there wasn't work for us, and he agreed with that, and he drove away, and that was almost the end of the Tyrconnell as we know it. And you have there was a company then called Iriscot, IRISCSCOT, so Irish Scotch, that joined forces, that were responsible for selling the old stock of Tyrconnell and the Shamrock and Corbett's Irish whiskey and all these brands that Abbey Street made and Waterside made. And in the 1970s, another fire hit the distillery, and the last remaining drops of the Tyrconnell flowed through the streets of Derry, and that was until the late 90s, early 2000s, the last the end of the hand of Andrew A. Watt, really, that touched the brand. So it's a beautiful history, and it's deep within Irish whiskey history.
And it's not well known that those stories are not retold very often, and they're not heard enough, and they're not known enough, are they? There was so much whiskey coming out of Northern Ireland. I mean, a powerhouse of whiskey distillation and exporting in the mid 1800s, late 1700s, early 1800s. We tend to think, it's easy to forget how big of an impact the distilleries in the north had on Irish whiskey sales globally.
Huge, yeah, huge. And it's once you get outside of the pot still kind of dominant area of Dublin and surrounding areas that you start to see how huge those distilleries were. And even if we were to rewind back to, well, they were always massive for illicit distilling and poaching making. And if we were to rewind back to, say, the 1800s, start of the 19th century, there's said to be over 800 illicit stills on the Inishowen Peninsula alone, which is not a huge area. And so that's what really, well, as we dive into that document that Ryan wrote, that's where Andrew A. Watt really got the desire to go and do something special, was because he saw the desire and growth of illicit distilling or poaching making, and knew there was an opportunity for him and his family to do that. But you're right, it's the conversation tends to get probably taken up, or up until recently, taken up with the big brands, and you tend to forget about these huge distilleries that were outside of the big distilleries that we know today.
And these stories remind me how little we know about little snapshots of time or moments in time where today we know where Tullamore Dew is distilled. We'll know where West Cork is distilled. We'll know all these components. If we're in the world of whiskey and we're interested in any way, we can start to assemble all this information, and it doesn't take long before you have a good snapshot of what comes from where, etc. But imagine trying to assemble that for 1864 or 1892 to understand what whiskies came from where and how they ended up in the United States and who are their distributors. I mean, there's a lifetime of research and kind of deep diving that could be done there on that, isn't there?
Yeah, without a doubt. And even like you're talking about Cooley, Kilbeggan, or well, I should remove Kilbeggan from that, but Cooley, that's a relatively new distillery in terms of the life time of Irish whiskey. I mean, Cooley's only been around since '87. There's what I love is that there's brands that are being released right now that have such a glitter past, and they mightn't be made. They might be made at a certain distillery or sourced from a certain distillery, but their brand roots dive so much deeper back into Irish history. And I suppose as the category grows, there's always ample opportunity for those brands to maybe distill once again, or bring that distilling back to where they were once distilled. And it's exciting.
It is.
I think Fernand O'Connor said it with his work with Bowen, that we're Irish whiskey, and a lot of people who don't know the category is old, but we're only in the infancy now of the new growth of Irish whiskey as we know it, which is cool.
It really is. And I can't remember who it was that shared this story or a little anecdote, but it struck me when I heard it, and I think it might have been one of our guests on the previous lock-in, that back in the late 1800s in New York or in the United States, if whiskey was served in a cocktail, or a whiskey was on a menu, if it was listed as whiskey, it was most likely Irish whiskey, and they had to differentiate with Scotch and bourbon by literally saying Scotch whiskey, bourbon whiskey, to differentiate, so that people would know that those are Scottish and those are American, as opposed to just whiskey, which was just accepted as being Irish.
Deadly, and I think that's great. And I think I know you mentioned it at the start of the show here, back to that 1909 Royal Commission on what is whiskey debate. That's class. And listening to that story and just being part of that, and knowing that we all work and consume Irish whiskey as we know it today, but we were such a dominant category only 100 years ago or 120 years ago, which is not that long. And then I always go back to, and maybe you can help me out on this, but the E in Irish whiskey. And I always go back to that time in 1909 when the Irish inserted the letter E. And that's what differentiates us now from Scotch, because grain or column still whiskey was declared whiskey. But we wanted to shift ourselves away from that blended stuff that they were making and focus on the punge or the positive whiskey they were making. Now, in saying that, we're talking about Tyrconnell tonight, when Andrew Watt adopted the column still and loved it. So it's funny.
I know, yeah. The E debate will rage on forever, and for as long as, I suppose, the myths are perpetuated about, well, the Irish added E because their whiskey is a little bit better than the Scots, etc. And tour guides take great pleasure in getting the easy laughs, I suppose. But I suppose, like anything of interest, there is nuance and there's detail over the years, and it seems like there's no one answer, is there, to which is the correct spelling. I think that there are examples of both, all the way back in Irish whiskey to the 1600s, 1700s. And Carol Quinn, the archivist in Middleton, has talked about how there would have been even differences in the spelling due to printer errors, due to illiteracy over the years as well. And I think 1966 standardized everything when Irish distillers merged and put the E back into Paddy whiskey, for example. And then the E was already in Jameson and Powers. And then suddenly all the whiskies in the Republic of Ireland had the E, and that became kind of the standard, and assumed from then on that was what was always the case. But it's detailed and nuanced. So now today we've got, of course, whiskies coming from Waterford and McConnell's and Blackwater Distillery. They don't use the E at all, and they're legally entitled not to do it. And but I feel sorry for them in their social media having to constantly explain it.
Yeah, and so they're obviously setting out on a journey that will hopefully last hundreds of years for them. And so this is only a short time where they'll have to explain it, which is nice as well. And
That's
Carol,
right.
I mean, I used to work. Carol won't remember this, but I worked with her in Guinness in the storehouse when she was the archivist for Guinness. And my God, like, we used to do tours, and I'd bring 30 to 40, 50 people, whatever it was, on tours of the storehouse, and we'd go into Carol's archive. And I haven't met her since then. I haven't seen the work that she's done with Middleton, but if it's half of what it was with Guinness, they're onto a good thing there, because she's just so detailed in what she does, and the history is so accurate, and you wouldn't question anything, which is nice. So I suppose as a
lady, like an absolute lady in Irish whiskey, like she's just as kind and as knowledgeable as you'll ever meet.
Yeah, for sure. And as a brand then associated with the brands that she works on in the category, we're confident knowing that her history is accurate as well. So it's nice having that. But some of the documents that they've found.
Yeah, their trove of information in the Midleton Distillery of all the brands that were merged together is fascinating. But one of the things that's always not confused me so much as it's an unusual thing is that today the Midleton Distillery, the Jameson tour, is you're touring a distillery that never made Jameson. You're touring a distillery that made whiskey for the Cork Distilleries Company, that are no longer made there, haven't been made there since the early 1970s, late 1960s. And it's fascinating, but all of the information and all of the history and all the heritage that is around that is from primarily Dublin. It's from Bow Street, it's from John's Lane, it's from the old locations, the original locations of the distilleries. And I know that Midleton is undergoing or planning to undergo a refurbishment and a kind of an elevation of their tour experience. And I wonder if it would bring in to play the fact that it's now a place that produces the Redbreasts and the Powers and the Jamesons of the world, not just a tour of how whiskey used to be produced, maybe how it's produced today as well, and the brands that are associated with it.
Yeah, and they've become they've become such legendary. They always were legendary brands within Irish whiskey, but today even they're growing in popularity. So having those names associated with your distillery is huge. And I'm sure, and I've never been down to Midleton, believe it or not.
Really?
And I know you're probably only around the corner where you grew up. But yeah, and I look forward to one day going down and checking it out.
We'll have to do a field trip, American whiskey people trip to the Midleton Distillery.
I'd love it. Yeah, I would love it.
Michael, I'm going to move on to the next whiskey, Blackpitts tonight. I don't know, did you pick up a bottle of Blackpitts, or do you have any of this yourself? Or
I couldn't find it. The two stores I went to, I couldn't find it. But I mean, I'm more than happy to stay on, Barry. If you're having the
crack, if you're interested, sure, please keep drinking along.
I'm trying to get you back up on my computer, but it's just saying your link.
Do you want me to send you another link?
Did you send a dodgy link?
You never know. After a few whiskeys, everything's dodgy. Let me email you a link to join there now. See if you can get in. You're on your phone there, are you?
I'm on the phone here, but yeah, and that's fine. If it's working, it's fine, but I can't see you.
Here, we'll send you another,
as big as
email you another one there now. We'll see if you get that. But the Tyrconnell 15-year-old, a lovely whiskey, a lovely single malt. It changes, it evolves, it grows, it's complex, light sweetness, not overpowering, little hint of the Madeira, a little hint of that fortified wine finish, but a lovely biscuity, green apple, red apple, hard sweets, hard candy, cooked sugar. That's what I'm getting on the Tyrconnell 15-year-old. So, and you get yourself a lovely tube as well, and you can put your money in that. You can save it. You can use it as a money box to save for your next bottle when you're finished.
That's the intention. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to pour a drop now. For those of you who are hanging out to see me drinking peated whiskey, we're moving on to Teeling. And this is a lovely bottle, the most unusual whiskey bottle I've ever seen. It is stubby and small and heavy, very unusual. It looks like it's a black bottle. It's actually a very dark green Teeling whiskey Blackpitts. And this is a peated single malt whiskey, 100% distilled in the Teeling Distillery. So it's only the second ever release of whiskey from the Teeling Distillery. And you may say to me, Barry, I've bought 65 whiskies from the Teeling Distillery. Yeah, but they weren't all distilled in the Teeling Distillery. And they're quite open about that when you ask them. This is the first whiskey that was distilled there was their single pot still, which was released back in 2018. And now this is their next release, which is their peated single malt, non-chill filtered. And we've got some good information about it too that I want to share with you. I'm going to pour a drop of this. Michael, you need an IT manager.
I'm telling you, this is ridiculous.
So I'm going to pull up some information here now. I was talking to Robert Caldwell, who's the global brand ambassador for Teeling during the week. And I said, will you ever send me some information on Blackpitts? I want some behind the scenes stuff. Give me some interesting information about this release so that I can share it with the audience. And he shared pages and pages and pages of information, which he was very kind to do. So this is, of course, a peated whiskey. It's a single malt, peated, meaning that it is the malt, the barley is malted, is dried over a peated fire, a smoky heat that permeates the grain and lives through distillation. It is the peated malt is not sourced in Ireland because there's really no commercially available peated malt in Ireland yet. It's sourced in Scotland from Glenesk, from in Speyside. And for those of you who are peated whiskey drinkers, you'll know that there is a range of, I suppose, intensities of peat, and it's measured in ppms or parts per million. This peated malt is brought into the distillery at 55 parts per million, 55 ppm, and then as it goes through distillation, each distillation will reduce that ppm, so that by the time it's finished, you're arriving at something in the region of 15 ppm that goes into the bottle. So kind of a very light peat, very, very light peat. The malt that they buy is not the medicinal Islay style malt. It's more of the Irish style malt, peated malt, which would be heather, grassy like, not as medicinal, not as overpowering, it doesn't punch you in the face, rather it brings a hand slowly to your face and just taps you in the cheek. That's all it is. No slaps, no big punches. It's milled, it's mashed in Dublin, it's fermented in Dublin, of course, in the Teeling Distillery. They have their wooden washbacks in the distillery, their pine washbacks in Dublin. It is then fermented. This is interesting, some information I got. It's the yeast that's used is a combination of two different types of yeast, distiller's yeast and South African white wine yeast. It's fermented for 24 hours in Oregon pine, and then it's moved to steel. And according to the distillery, what leaves the fermentation tanks has an ABV of about 10%. 10%. They talk about having esters of pineapple and passion fruit at that stage as well in some of the notes that they sent me. Triple distilled. They have the 3 stills, of course, in the Teeling Distillery. So let's have a little nose. So it's not overpowering in any way. There's a lovely sweetness that comes with it. A little bit of barbecue, a little bit of mesquite maybe, but the peat has a lovely balance. This is a young enough whiskey, which tends to suit a peated whiskey. It is matured in a couple of different casks. It's matured in Sauternes casks, which are a sweet French wine. Sauternes casks and ex-bourbon casks. So the 2/3 component ex-bourbon casks, 1/3 ex-Sauterne cask. What else do we know about it? Full maturation too in the Sauternes, not a finish. Okay. Feel free to put some questions in there if you have them, but I'll take a little nose of this. Yeah, lovely, sweet, very lightly peated nose, very, very lightly peated. So, sláinte, take a little sip. I get now on the palate. Now I get the charcoal. I get dripping barbecue ribs. I get. What else do I get? It's dry. It's not overly sweet on the palate. It seems sweeter on the nose than the palate. It's quite dry. Caramel, vanilla notes coming through. The smoke, the peat does not overpower it. It's actually quite enjoyable. Says he surprisingly at his enjoyment of a peated whiskey. No, this is a really interesting one. I'm loving the journey into the peated world. I'm not 100% committed to it yet. I'm kind of not being dragged kicking and screaming into it, but rather I'm being coaxed slowly into it. And I'm enjoying this one. This is quite nice. The whiskey is named for the area around the distillery. So behind the distillery is an area that would have been known as Blackpitts area of Dublin. And there, back in the day, they had tanneries, they had blacksmiths, they had malt houses. And you'll notice that it's a kind of a very old style, kind of a throwback label, and it's inspired by that old, the look, the feel, the time that it has inspired this distillery, so the Blackpitts area. So there would have been peated malting going on behind the distillery back in the day as well. Of course, no longer does it happen. In fact, behind the distillery now, isn't it the Dublin Liberties distillery is behind it? Nobody would ever accuse Teeling of not cornering every aspect of the Irish whiskey market. So you might find these tri-packs around where they've got their single grain, their single malt, their small batch. So those are kind of their three entries to kind of show people who they were as a brand, get a foothold, sourced whiskies, but a single malt, a blend, and a single grain. And then, of course, 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, they released a single pot still, and now they have a peated single malt. So they've got a blend, single grain, single malt, single pot still, and a peated single malt, which there aren't many distilleries can say they have all 5 of those being released in addition to the 60 other variations that they have going on as well. While Teeling's been waiting for their own whiskies to be maturing or to be matured, I think it seems like their focus has been primarily on the maturation and the use of interesting casks, from pineapple rum casks to unusual wine finishes, and sourcing different beer finishes as well, which has been quite interesting. But this one is enjoyable, and it's great to see that it's in the United States. And this would be a very light and easy way to introduce somebody to peated whiskey. So, yep. Has anybody tried it, I wonder? It's not Ardbeg. It is not. Chris says, Barry, you're talking me into buying another bottle. Listen, you might as well enjoy whiskey while we're here. Spend your money on good things. You can't take it with you. Jacob says Highland Peat is really quite different than Isla Peat. And, oh yes, Bourbon Baller says Teeling Chestnut Cask is also in his top 5. So back to that point about their cask finishes and their maturations have tended to be focused, have been their focus. Their releases have been focused on these areas because, well, they're a new distillery. They're waiting for their stock to reach a certain age. And as they do, they've, of course, like many distilleries, been sourcing whiskey from elsewhere and then finishing it their way and putting their own stamp on it and putting their own slant on the whiskey. So this is a really enjoyable one. I think this would be up there now with one of my favorite peated whiskies, honestly, of all the ones that I've tried. I've tried Dark Silky, W.D. O'Connell, Bill Phil, Connemara. This one's quite good. Mrs. Stories and Sips will need a sip of this. Would you like it? Would you like a drop of it? It's quite light. Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. Give you the bottle there. Right? No clean glasses left. You drink it straight out of the bottle. Get you a straw. Blackpitts. Tony has had it and he likes it. Oh, good. Jeff has a glass full of Blackpitts. Jeff, are you? I believe you do like your peated whiskies. Wonder what you think of this one. Steve says, tastes like somebody put out a beach fire with seaweed and ocean water. Is that this one? Chris says, I wonder if Barry has a new graphic for the peated section of the show. Maybe I need one. And you know what? I create all these graphics today and I've forgotten to use all of them. So I need to use one. We are now in the malt segment, which we were back in the Tyrconnell hour as well. But malt, single and ready to mingle. This is our malt segment. Isn't that brilliant? The wonders of a few graphics. Endlessly entertaining, to me anyway, whatever about the rest of you. Gawkin says, it is a mainland Speyside peat then. Brookladdy uses peat from Inverness in one of their Port Charlotte expressions, as it has an American barbecued meat note. Yeah, so that's something I don't know a whole lot about, and I need to dive into now that I'm starting down this journey, is the different types of peat and the different styles of peated malt and where they're used and their destinations. Connor is saying that he loves it, loves the different branding. Yeah, it is unashamedly different. I think it's a beautiful bottle, stunning bottle. That'll stand out on the shelf. It reminds me of a beer growler, actually. It's got the kind of a look of a beer growler, and it's nice and heavy. That lovely little nameplate at the bottom. Is that a sticker or is it a little bit of metal? I think it's just an embossed sticker. But yeah, it's a lovely, lovely bottle, dark green color. If I had a different light, you'd see the color of it, but it looks black, but it's actually dark green, single malt. In terms of an age statement, my understanding is that it's approximately 4 years of age. It may be a little bit older, but my understanding is that it's about 4 years of age. And that's an interesting discussion, isn't it? The age/quality discussion, whether we should dismiss something for being young or whether we'd be better off never knowing if something was old or young. We, of course, pay more for older whiskies, not because they're better, but because there's less of them, fewer of them out there. And the costs to mature a whiskey to 30 years, when you only have 20 or 30% of that inventory left by the end of it due to evaporation, those costs are still the same. You have to recoup them. But I don't know. It's an interesting question about age and value and age and quality, which I struggle with sometimes. I wish I didn't know the age of any whiskies, and I just tasted them blind and decided whether I liked them or I didn't, and wasn't in any way informed or led by what I thought was the age of them. Michael has come back in. He's paid his bill. There he is.
I'm sorry about that, Barry.
You missed the best bit. We won the lotto while you were away. Like, we picked all the right numbers and we all shared in the winnings. It was amazing.
Did you? I was hoping you wouldn't have managed to hammer out every verse of the L triangle while I was gone.
We saved that for you.
I did pour a drop of Connemara, which is also a peated whiskey, but not just the peated Irish. But while you're chatting about it, because I'm very interested to learn about Blackpitts, which I've tried, and it's very, very tasty.
Connemara, of course, the original, at least in our generation, the original peated Irish whiskey. I mean, not the original, but certainly of the whiskies we'd have known. There's some lesser known Connemaras, but by all accounts, incredible, like a 22-year-old Connemara.
Yeah, 22. 12 to 22 it jumps. There's the Connemara Turf Moor. There's Connemara Bog Oak, which is a very, very rare style of Connemara, which is out there. And it's cool. Like, again, just back to the Teeling days that we spoke about, of owning Cooley and Kilbeggan Distillery. They did some phenomenally innovative things, and Bog Oak is one. But even just to chat briefly on the peat, because I know when I lost internet there or whatever it was, you were chatting about the peat and the style of peat that's used for Blackpitts and everything else as in Scotch. Simon Brooking, who's our Lefroy and Beaumont global ambassador, always describes, which I think is perfect, and I'm sure Blackpitts falls in within the Connemara kind of peat flavor profile, describes it as like an Islay peat. So Lefroy, Beaumont would be like a bonfire on a beach, versus Connemara, and I won't speak to Blackpitts, but you tell me if it's similar, is a bonfire in a forest. So a lot of pine notes associated with the peat. So you get and the sea influence on the barley on Islay is so evident in the whiskey. Or the sea influence on the peat that's soaked and then obviously dries the barley is so evident in the finished product.
So you're getting that saline, salty, medicinal component note with an Islay, and Teeling called this more heather / grass like. So back to your kind of forest vegetation kind of approach.
Yeah, and it's brilliant to taste the differences between the two, and even putting an Islay up against an Irish peat is night and day, and they're both peated whiskies. I
haven't had the time to get into anything other than. Well, I mean, every week there's 5 more releases from Ireland you got to keep up with, and you got to try and figure out, do you want them? Do you want to taste them? Do you need to get them? And then I often get asked, what's your favorite Scotch or bourbon? And I said, are you joking? Sure, I haven't even got through the Irish yet. Where am I going to find the time,
How are you doing in your progression, your peat progression?
I mentioned there that I've been enjoying it. Like, I've been enjoying the journey. I'm not there yet. Like, I don't know that I'd choose a peated whiskey over a heavy fortified wine component whiskey or a pot still, an aged pot still. Like, give me an old Redbreast port pipe finish, or God, it'd be hard to beat that, to be honest. But there's a place for it. Like, I would think of a peated whiskey for me now as outdoors is when I'm cold, and I know it's a kind of a bit of a cliche beside the bonfire, sitting around there because you're kind of smelling it and tasting at the same time. But that seems to be the mood, kind of the mindset it puts me in.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I think you're right, and everyone, I think 99% would agree with you. Try it if you're ever when you get back into a busy bar and you're having one of these Saturday or Sunday morning, afternoon brunches. Try a peated whiskey, whether it's Connemara, Blackpitts, Lafroig, or any Isla peated whiskey in a Bloody Mary, and see how you think, because it's a very, very tasty substitute to vodka or whiskey or whatever you choose typically, because it brings a whole new spice or kind of, it brings that bonfire kind of smoky spice to a Bloody Mary, which is tasty.
That's a good suggestion. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose I need to try these peated whiskies alongside one another too, and actually take an hour or two and just sit down and think and sniff and taste and make some notes and try to extract things that sometimes in the lock-in you're flying around looking at comments and trying to you don't, maybe you're not 100% focused on, it's not the right tasting environment,
Yeah. I mean, I love it. I would drink a peated whiskey over a lot of other whiskeys for sure. I'm a big, and I know I mentioned to you last year, but I'm a big bourbon fan. So I like that kind of sweeter, warmer note associated with bourbon. And Anne was talking about single grain today. It's that kind of the corn note that I like. But in saying that, on the flip side, I love a good peated whiskey.
So forgive my ignorance, but are there any peated bourbons then, or peated American whiskies?
Yeah, you have smoky whiskies, smoky American whiskies for sure. Within the Beam portfolio, I don't know if we have any bourbons that are, or American whiskies, I should say, that are peated. There is if you ever travel through America, or I believe it's in Europe, there's a beautiful collaboration between Jim Beam and Lafroig, which you can get your hands on, which is Jim Beam aged in Lafroig casks, which is quite rare. It comes in I might have bought, do I have bought in the room, but it comes in a big silver canister. That's a nice, and I know we spoke about collaboration earlier on, but it was a beautiful collaboration between Jim Beam and Lafroig. So there are peated American whiskies for sure, and then there's peated single malts from America and kind of brands that are very similar to an Isla single malt. Okay,
I'll have to keep an eye out. I think, the biggest obstacle, I think, over the past year and a half, as I've gotten more into whiskey, has been the sampling of these great, like I love the idea of trying more scotches and bourbons, but the old whiskey budget gets eaten up very fast for the Irish whiskey, especially when the bars aren't open, so you have to buy full bottles. Whereas if I can go to a pub now and say, look, I'll spend $10 or $15 and I'll try this whiskey, I'd be willing to make that bet,
That's what I was saying to Dave in the liquor store around the corner yesterday, was that it's a big commitment for people to hear about a lock-in or hear about a virtual session that they want to go and join. And sometimes it could be a $50, $60 plus commitment. And that's tough to do for everyone.
It is, yeah.
Whereas when you're in a bar, it's nice to be able to say, right, I'll just try it. If it costs 15 quid and I can afford to do it, then yeah, let's just try it out and see what it's like. Yeah,
for sure. I'm only around the corner from a great whiskey bar, like the Whiskey House in San Diego, that has 3,800 whiskeys, and so while it's a little bit on the steep side price wise, at least if I get a recommendation from yourself or somebody in the lock-in that says, or Dave here or Steve, and they say, okay, try a High West Campfire. I don't need to drop the $80 or the $100 potentially in a bottle. I just go over there and say, right, here's $20. Let me taste it.
Yeah, and you might know a bartender that might give you a taste before you pay for it, which is nice.
We do some swaps. I'll bring over some Redbreast.
keep plugging the pubs.
Bring some Tyrconnell 15.
yeah, for sure. That's the great thing about these virtual sessions as well. I've gotten to know and meet bartenders and bar owners and every employee from bars that I wouldn't meet regularly. So it's nice to get to know them like that. So I do look forward to going traveling again and actually putting a face to a name.
That's it. And sure, we'll have to have an old session ourselves, have an old pint, a few whiskies like.
Yeah, hopefully a few weeks. We'll
see. Looking forward to it. Well, I think we are almost at the end of our session tonight. We've had a great old session, almost 3 hours in. 3 great guests. Michael, you've been an oracle of knowledge as usual, and great crack. The Tyrconnell 15-year-old is a lovely treat. Glad I picked it up and I'll be emptying that bottle fairly sharpish. Love the Madeira finish. Love that little sweet and biscuity note at the same time. And it was great to visit the old pub in Alexandria, Virginia, to see Niamh O'Donovan from Cork flying the Irish flag in Daniel O'Connell's. And of course, and Deno did a great job of introducing us to Clonakilty. I will also be buying a bottle of that Clonakilty cask strength because there's a space. There's a space on the shelf. Let me see. Jeff says, song. Isn't that why we have Michael here? Isn't he a great singer? Michael's a great man for a tune. He has a lovely few tunes.
I texted while I was paying the Wi-Fi bill there, Barry. I texted Paddy and I said, "Are you around for a song?"
He did not.
He hasn't written back.
No wonder.
But
did you set up the last time? No, did you not pay the bill the last time for poor old Paddy? He's no wonder he's not returning your texts.
when you do the traveling lock-in live stream from Chicago, I promise you, Paddy will be front and center. If you want.
That'll be a session. John, we bring in Jonathan Egan as well, yourself, Paddy. There's a whole pile of Chicago folks that we'd have a good old session, wouldn't we?
So many. And Donald from Glendalough is here. Johnny, yeah.
That's right.
We'll have a nice session for sure.
That's no way to avoid a song though, Michael. Like, I know that was a great deflection there at saying, well, when we're in person, like, you know. have you a tune? Have you a verse?
I sang a tune. I sang a song the last time, and you have to follow me up with one if you promise. Then
I'll follow up. If you sing a tune, I'll sing one after you.
Battery's about to go here, Barry, on the phone.
Chancer.
I'll sing a song. Let's think. A song that, all right, an appropriate song. I think that. This is awfully strange now. Actually, this is probably the fourth or fifth song that I've sang virtually over the last year, which is very strange. We're itching to get back into a pub. That incorporates, I think, Ireland, and we spoke about Madeira, so Portugal, which is nice. And I don't know if you've ever heard of a song called from a famous Irish singer called Frank Hart, a Dublin man, called "The Maid of Cabra West."
No, I've not.
So we're Blackpitts, Dublin. We're incorporating. We need to kind of figure out a way to kind of intertwine Tyrconnell into this, but we'll do it. And Portugal, which I think is important. We spoke about it, Madeira.
She's just squeezing it all in.
Apologies in advance if this is not appropriate for some viewers, but it's a lock-in.
Take it away, Michael. It's all yours.
Well, it's all for the love of this fair young maid and her Portuguese sailor boy. For the passionate love of this fair young maid, it was a 1 and a 2 ride. But there was a fly in the ointment now that you very seldom see. For although I loved her terrible well, she was in love with a Portuguese. Now he was a nasty piece of stuff, Rosales was his name, and he couldn't wait for to get his hands on Concepta, who was me dame. So I made me a vow be the Grand Canal that I would do him in, for I did not like them Portuguese, and in particular, I didn't like him. So I followed them up to Grafton Street one evening just for fun. It was around by the Mercer Hospital, next door to the Barclay Dun. I spied them kissing in the corner seat. They were sitting there holding hands, and there he was seducing her with pints of baby shams. So I followed him up to his lodgings in Rathgar or thereabouts, and as he made his way up the alleyway, sure I battered him inside out, and he let out many an oath and roar, till he was gone I'm sure, and I lifted up the manhole lid and I dropped him down the sewer. Now when the mot she heard of this, she made me life a hell, and it's all for the love and peace and quiet I did her in as well. And now I'm up before the judge to answer for me crime. He said I didn't mind the first one, son, but not the second time. So it's all for the love of this fair young maid and her Portuguese sailor boy. For the passionate love of this fair young maid, I've landed in Mountjoy.
And if ever I get out of here, I'll change me life, you'll see. And I'll marry with a mott from Walkinstown who wouldn't look at a Portuguese. Sláinte.
Sláinte, Michael. Brilliant. Brilliant. Fair play to you.
A bit of Frank Hart.
Listen, that's brilliant. Jeez, now we're getting into it. That's great. The crowd going wild. They're loving it.
Are they? I can't see any comments.
Here, I'll throw up some bills on the walls, bras hanging from the ceiling, claps, cheers, loads of claps. Got Portuguese flags flying around as well.
Good stuff. I personally have nothing against the Portuguese. Love them.
Lovely people. Lovely
Great
people.
bunch of lads. Yeah.
Great bunch of lads, and they make a lovely wine. And
They do.
if we didn't have the Portuguese, we mightn't have a whiskey like that. So fair play to the Portuguese.
Or like that.
Or like that. That's right. That's right. Exactly. Good man. Fair play. Fair play. Right. So I'll give a blast of a song, and then we'll wrap it up. We'll close the doors. The lock-in is officially over then. I'll have to tie it back to Cork then. If we had Clonakilty, and we had good representation there on West Cork, and I'll move an hour east back to East Cork, back to Cove, and a fairly regular song that I'd sing here, which would be The Contender, about the boxer Jack Doyle and his rise to fame and his fall from fame in the early 1930s and 40s, and he was lifted off the quays of Cove as he was lifting baggage as a young boy, and he was about 6'6", and he was drafted into the British Army because he was so big, and he had big hands like shovels. And they said, you should be a boxer. So they threw him into the ring, and he won every fight when he was a young fella. But as he got older, he started drinking, and the drink got the better of him. And so it's a warning song. It's a celebration of a rise to the top, and it's a warning to us all that we're only ever a drink or two away from falling from grace, whatever our grace may be. So we'll have a little song, a little hat tip to Jack Doyle, but also don't be like Jack Doyle. Right. Here we go. Oh, when I was young and I was in my day, I could steal what woman's heart there was away. Sing and dance until the dawning, blaze a trail until the morning, long before I was the man you see today. And I was born beneath the star that promised all. I could have lived my life between Cove, Cork and Youghal, but the wheel of fortune took me. From the highest point she shook me. By the bottle live and by the bottle I shall fall. But there in the mirror on the wall, I see the dream is fading, from the contender to the fall. The ring, the rose, the matador is raving. And when I die, I'll die a drunk down on the street. You can count me out to 10 in clear defeat. Wrap the starry plough around me. Let the piper's air resound me. There I'll rest until the Lord of Love I'll meet. But there in the mirror on the wall, I see the dream is fading, from the contender to the brawl. The ring, the rose, the matador is raving. Oh, when I was young and I was in my day, I could steal what woman's heart there was away. I'd sing and dance into the dawning, blaze a trail until the morning, long before I was the man you see today. Sláinte.
Sláinte, Barry. Fair play to you.
Fair play, Michael.
Beautiful song.
It's a lovely song. It's a lovely song. There's a fall from grace, but it's a lovely song.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I'm sure you have so many Irish Whiskey fans of American Story Sips fans that have songs that you've had people on, I'm sure, as well. That
we have, yeah. We need more people. So if there's more people who want to sing a song at any time, shoot me a message. I'll put a shout out in the group as well. If people want to come on and play a tune, we'd love to hear from you and make this a proper lock-in because we're not going away anytime soon. But yeah,
you can create an album, Barry.
Yeah, we should. Yeah,
sessions from around the world.
Irish whiskey fans. Yeah, the lock-in live streams, unplugged sessions.
Love it.
Listen, Michael, this has been brilliant. Listen, thanks a million for jumping on and for having the crack with us. It's been great to see you, great to chat with you, and it's been a highlight of my week now getting the chat and sampling the whiskey with you. So looking forward to having a drink with you in person, and sure we'll talk to you soon.
Apologies about the Wi-Fi issues. Yeah,
no bother.
Take care.
Cheers, Michael. Thanks a million.
Cheers, Barry. Sláinte.
All the best. Sláinte. Folks, thanks a million for joining and for sharing in our lock-in. 3 wonderful guests. We got a tour of a pub. We didn't expect it. And we got to drink some nice whiskies and speak to nice people. I have a musician joining next week who I'm very excited about. And his name is Niall Connolly. And Mrs. Stories and Sips and I have heard him sing in Boston, in New York, many times in New York. He has opened for Glenn Hansard, one of our favorite musicians in Boston, and we've gotten to know him, and he is going to join us next week from New York and play for us. Wonderful singer, moving songs, and he's a hilarious guy too. So I'm looking forward to having the chat with him and having the crack, and we'll be sipping on some whiskeys. So more music, more stories next week. And in the meantime, I'll see you in the Irish Whiskey Fans of America Facebook group. If you're not already in there, please join us. 8,200 of you are already in there, Irish Whiskey Fans of America. And we'll be back here next week. And we will have, I've got some amazing lock-ins coming. Amazing guests that I never thought we'd get are going to join us over the next few weeks. There are already plans in place for some live lock-ins being talked about and discussed. And we will share those details once the time is right and once we're comfortable and safe and vaccinated and can travel. We get our second vaccination in 2 weeks' time, and we get to start planning some fun things like that. So we'll keep you in touch, or keep you informed, and we'll keep in touch. So thanks a million for joining again, and we will see you all next week. So, sláinte everybody. Sláinte.